A fierce battle was taking place between the demon army and humanity. During the battle, the protagonist, Twait, was carrying a heart while asking a demon whether destroying it would kill the demon lord. The heavily injured demon confirmed this, allowing Twait to realize that the object he was holding was indeed the demon lord's heart. The demon remarked that he could hardly believe he had been defeated by someone like Twait instead of the hero. However, Twait explained that the hero had a different plan for defeating the demon lord. In response, the demon commented that the demon lord of that generation had been extremely weak, and that even humans were probably aware of it. He added that after such a difficult battle against such a weak demon lord, there was no way the hero would have been capable of defeating a truly powerful one. The demon then bid farewell to the person who had been lurking in the shadows the entire time, referring to Twait himself. He admitted that he felt honored to be killed by Twait rather than by the hero. Finally, Twait crushed the demon lord's heart and completed the mission of destroying it. Soon after, he heard a voice informing him that the demon lord had finally been defeated and ordering him to return immediately. He was also warned to remain hidden on the way back, as his existence in that place must never be discovered by anyone. Twait silently agreed before cutting off the connection. As he reflected on everything, Twait could not say that he felt like humanity's savior. Instead, he believed that he had merely been raised as a tool to win the Great War. Now that the war had ended and the final mission assigned to him was nearly complete, he found himself confused about how he was supposed to live the rest of his life. The scene then shifted to the capital of the Terraria kingdom, Makurla, where the citizens were celebrating the hero's victory. People were selling goods throughout the lively marketplace, while others enjoyed the festivities. Hidden within the shadows, Twait made his way toward the special meeting room inside the royal castle. As soon as he entered, a lady named Chris praised his work and remarked that it had been a long time since they had last met. Chris replied that she had expected Twait to say something like that since they had only been communicating through devices lately. She added that it was her first time leaving the headquarters in an entire month. Twait then asked about the reports regarding the demon lord, and Chris assured him that everything had gone smoothly. Within a few days, news about the hero defeating the demon lord would spread throughout the entire world, even though Twait was the one who had truly defeated him. As Twait sat down in front of her, he remarked that it did not matter who had defeated the demon lord because the victory did not belong to him alone, but to the organization itself. Hearing that, Chris commented that Twait was as pathetic as ever. She then asked whether he would be turning 15 that year, to which Twait quietly agreed. Suddenly, Chris placed a huge pile of papers and documents in front of him, explaining that they contained records of his job history. Twait stared at the stack in surprise and commented that there was far more than he had expected. Chris revealed that the documents represented the countless achievements he had accomplished over the years. She reminded him that the organization's objective had always been to support the hero from behind the scenes during the Fourth Great Hero-Demon War against the Demon Lord, who was considered a calamity, while the hero served as humanity's symbol of hope. As the title suggested, a Demon Lord and a hero would appear one day, and the conflict known as the Great Hero-Demon War had already repeated itself 3 times over the last 30 years. Twait reflected that the war had always ended with the hero's victory, which ultimately meant humanity's victory as well. Chris explained that around 10 years earlier, when the new Demon Lord had appeared, the 4th-generation hero had also been born within the kingdom. Twait already knew that any nation capable of producing a hero would naturally gain authority over other countries. Chris confirmed this and explained that if a hero defeated the Demon Lord, the hero's homeland would become an exalted nation, overflowing with wealth and prosperity. However, if the hero were to die, the consequences would be catastrophic. She continued by saying that the leaders of the Terraria kingdom had become deeply concerned about the possibility that the hero born within their country might fail to defeat the Demon Lord. As a result, the organization known as Kiradam had been established to support the hero from 2 different sides, the light and the shadows. From the light, support came openly through official means, while from the shadows, there existed a secret military organization that carried out operations without caring about legality or morality. However, 4 years earlier, the organization had stopped limiting itself to merely supporting the hero and had instead begun moving a substitute hero behind the scenes. When Chris mentioned the reason for that decision, she remarked that Twait probably understood it better than anyone else. Twait silently agreed as she continued speaking. Around 4 years ago, the hero's powers had started to weaken noticeably. Soon after, an unimaginable situation occurred. The hero became incapable of defeating even an ordinary demon. Despite repeatedly challenging demons and attempting to invade the Demon Lord's castle alongside elite knights gathered from across the world, every battle ended in defeat. The hero would return heavily injured each time, forcing others to rescue him. The situation caused widespread panic. Everyone watched as the hero bravely continued fighting over and over again, only to fail every single time. Eventually, People began fearing that the hero might die before ever reaching the Demon Lord. At that point, many believed humanity itself might be destroyed for the first time in history. Then, everything changed when one member of the organization succeeded in killing a demon that even the hero could not defeat. Chris suddenly asked Twait why he kept dancing around the subject instead of speaking directly, since he was the very person who had killed that demon. Twait calmly replied that she herself had been the one who gave him the order to do it. Chris became slightly annoyed and remarked that she might indeed have said something like that, but it did not really matter anymore. Twait then explained that ever since that incident, the organization had begun standing on the front lines and fighting demons directly. However, because the organization operated in secrecy, all of its achievements and accomplishments were publicly credited to the hero instead. That was the organization's method of keeping its existence hidden from the world. Twait noticed a trace of dissatisfaction on Chris's face and commented on it. Chris immediately admitted it before emotionally shouting that no matter how anyone looked at it, the organization's contributions had far surpassed those of the knights and even the hero himself. Despite that, they could never allow the public to learn about the organization's existence. Growing even more emotional, she grabbed a drink and complained that, publicly, they were treated as nothing more than handymen for the army. Twait continued the conversation by pointing out that if she kept ranting like that, the higher-ups might start viewing him as a risk factor. However, he already understood how special and secretive the organization was, considering he had been a member of it for the last 10 years. Chris nodded and decided to move on to the main topic. She informed him that the dissolution of the organization had already been decided. Since the Demon Lord had been defeated, the special military organization had lost its purpose. Unlike the Night Orders, which still maintained public order, the organization no longer had any role to fulfill. Twait then asked what he was supposed to do from now on. Chris explained that since the organization was being dissolved, she had been assigned to handle consultations regarding his future. Surprised, Twait asked whether he actually had the right to choose his own future. Chris replied that this was exactly what she meant and asked whether he had any plans for the future, assuring him that she would do her best to support whatever decision he made. She also mentioned that it was an assignment personally given to her by the higher-ups. Twait suspiciously asked whether the organization was essentially bribing its members for the rest of their lives to ensure they would never betray its secrets. Chris simply gave him a thumbs up and admitted that it was basically true. She added that since Twait's achievements were on an entirely different level from everyone else's, he would receive far better treatment than the others. Twait then asked what she planned to do in the future. Chris replied that she would continue doing work similar to her current duties. When Twait was about to say something else, Chris immediately stopped him, reminding him that he was still only 15 years old. She reminded him that the organization had taken him in when he was only 5, and since then he had spent his entire life fighting for the kingdom. However, she told him that it was enough now, and that from this point onward, he should live for himself instead of for others. In truth, Twait realized he barely knew anything about the world. He had spent his entire life protecting humanity without even understanding what normal life looked like. Even after killing the Demon Lord, he felt strangely empty inside. The Great War had caused countless casualties, and Twait could not even remember how many comrades had died beside him. Many of them had fought without fully understanding what they were protecting or striving toward. That was why Twait admitted that he simply wanted to live like an ordinary person. He wanted to experience daily life, freedom, and the peaceful existence he had never been able to enjoy before. Chris warmly replied that such a wish was completely fine. After thinking for a moment, she suggested that enrolling in an academy would probably be the best choice for him. Normally, 15-year-olds attended academies to study and socialize, so if Twait truly wanted to experience ordinary life, spending time among people his own age would help him adapt naturally. Twait commented that since there were not many years separating him from others his age, blending in should not be too difficult. Chris immediately became irritated and shouted that they were not discussing an undercover mission anymore. With that settled, she stated that the only thing left was deciding on a proper name for him. Until then, Twait had always been referred to only by a number. Chris first suggested the name John, though Twait clearly disliked it. She then proposed names like Mike and Michael, insisting that he would eventually get used to them. However, Twait instead suggested the name Twite. Chris looked surprised and wondered whether that would not make things too similar to how they had always. Twait calmly replied that was exactly why the name would work for him. Chris then told him to wait for a while because she now had to create an entirely new identity for him. She explained that she needed to prepare his personal records, educational background, and other official documents. As she was about to leave, Twait suddenly called out to her and thanked her for everything she had done for him. He admitted that he had grown up without even understanding basic common sense, yet he had managed to survive all this time thanks to her guidance. Hearing those words, Chris became emotional and asked him not to say things like that. Even though she always tried to maintain a professional distance, she confessed that she had always thought of him as her little brother. She assured him that if he ever needed help, he could contact her anytime. Twait quietly promised that he would. After that, Twait's new life finally began. His first destination was the opening ceremony of the Bilzard Royal Academy. However, during his journey there, he contacted Chris in a panic because something terrible had happened. He had gotten lost. Chris was shocked and asked how he had managed to get lost, despite sounding so confident when they had parted ways earlier. Twait awkwardly replied that if he kept wandering around like this, he would end up being late for his very first day, so he had no idea what he should do anymore. Chris then asked where he currently was. Twait replied that the only thing he could see was an enormous mansion. Judging by its appearance, he assumed it either belonged to a duke or perhaps even to the royal family itself. He added that he could not see anything resembling a school, so he believed he must have taken a wrong turn somewhere. Chris immediately denied that assumption and informed him that the massive building he was looking at was actually the Bilzard Royal Academy itself. Hearing that, Twait stared at the enormous structure in shock and commented that the academy was absolutely gigantic. Bildar's Academy was known as the greatest academy in the entire kingdom. It was also the prestigious institution where the current hero, Shion, had once been trained. With its long history and remarkable achievements, the academy had earned a reputation worthy of being called legendary. As Twait looked at the enormous academy building, he recalled the conversation he had previously had with Chris regarding the academy's two different courses, the hero course and the common course. Chris had explained that after the hero's victory in the war against the demons, the academy anticipated major economic and social changes brought by the hero's fame. Because of that, the academy decided to make significant changes to its admission system starting that year. The hero course would continue following the same strict curriculum that had once been used to train the hero himself. On the other hand, the common course had been created in response to the arrival of a peaceful era after the war's end. Unlike the hero course, it was designed to be far more relaxed and suitable for ordinary civilian life. Until the previous year, the academy had only offered the hero course. At that time, applicants were either accepted or rejected entirely based on whether they were compatible with the demanding curriculum. However, from that year onward, even students who failed the entrance examination for the hero course could still enroll in the common course. In fact, applicants for the common course only needed to pass a document screening process to gain admission. After hearing that explanation, Twait had wondered whether the common course was essentially meant to serve as a safety net for people who failed the hero course examination. Chris had replied that although it was supposed to remain confidential, there was already a noticeable difference in the quality of facilities available to students from the two courses. Because of that, she believed a social gap would eventually begin forming between them. She had then asked Twait which course interested him more. Without hesitation, Twait chose the common course. Since his entire goal was to experience a normal and peaceful life, he believed it was only logical for him to select the ordinary course rather than the hero course. Besides, if he enrolled in the common course, he would not even need to go through the entrance examination. With that explanation, Twait realized that he would not need to take any examination if he chose the common course. On his first day, after leaving the main hall, he would simply head directly to the orientation instead of participating in the entrance exam. As Twait recalled that conversation, he looked around the enormous academy grounds and thought that the place was far too massive. Since it was his first time there, he honestly had no idea where he was supposed to go. At that moment, a boy approached him and asked whether he was there for the admissions process. When Twait quietly confirmed it, the boy kindly pointed him toward a long line of students and explained that the staff there would guide him through the next steps. After some time, a woman stepped onto a temporary stage and immediately drew everyone's attention. She introduced herself as Farnes Evans, one of the instructors of the Academy's hero course. Farnes proudly announced that Bildar's Academy was a legendary institution responsible for training the current hero, and because of that reputation, the Academy took great pride in carefully selecting its students. However, since the admission process had recently changed, she admitted that she had initially been worried that the overall quality of the Academy's students might decline. Still, after seeing the gathered applicants, it appeared she no longer had anything to worry about. Since there was little time to waste, she decided to keep her introduction brief. Twait initially wondered whether the orientation had already ended. However, according to the guide he had received earlier, students enrolled in the common course were supposed to head directly to their classrooms afterward, while applicants for the hero course had to remain behind until the entrance examination concluded. For Twait, this marked the true beginning of his academic life. He had never expected himself to feel so nervous that his body would actually begin trembling. Unlike his previous life as a soldier, he no longer needed the strength or techniques he had acquired through countless battles. He no longer needed deception, combat tactics, or the skills used to kill enemies. From now on, he simply wanted to live an ordinary life as a student in the common course. That peaceful life was exactly what he had always wanted to experience. Suddenly, Farnes announced that the entrance examination for the hero course would now begin. Twait looked confused as Farnes continued explaining the rules. The exam would consist of a massive battle royale among all participants. The time limit was 1 hour, door, and the battlefield would be the entire old academy building located to their right. She further explained that a magical barrier had already been erected around the area, meaning the participants would not need to hold back. They were free to use the strongest magic they possessed. Farnez's tone then became much sharper as she loudly declared that the hero course was not meant for mere admirers of the hero. The academy had no need for commoners who simply worshipped heroes from afar. Instead, she demanded that the applicants fight with the determination to inherit the hero's title themselves as the next generation. Hearing her passionate speech, the applicants confidently shouted their agreement. Soon after, another instructor ordered all students participating in the examination to proceed toward the old academy building. Twait approached the man and explained that he only wanted to join the common course. However, the man assumed that Twait was already frightened and mockingly remarked that if he truly intended to give up, he should at least do so in a place filled with glory. Hearing that, Twait simply nodded to himself, believing there was no way he would be accepted into the hero course anyway, despite having taken the exam. Since the common course did not even have an entrance examination hall, he thought that even if he somehow passed the test, he could simply request a transfer to the common course later. Meanwhile, Farnez observed the participants and announced that everyone had already taken their positions. She explained that several magical tools known as long-range mirrors had been installed around the building. Through those devices, the academy instructors would monitor the movements of the participants and determine whether they had passed the examination. As Twait looked at one of the mirrors, he recalled the training from his time on duty, where he had been taught never to expose himself in front of mirrors or reveal any defenseless openings. The thought that he was now openly standing before such a device sent a shiver down his spine. Soon, the examination officially began, though Twait had no idea what he was supposed to do. Moments later, a massive explosion echoed through the area, and he realized that such chaos was to be expected in the hero course examination. After all, it was normal for the participants to use magic freely during the test. Since Twait only wished to enter the common course, he did not feel any need to actually pass the examination. However, he also understood that retiring too early could create unnecessary problems for him later. There were nearly 1,000 participants taking the exam, but only 100 would ultimately be accepted into the hero course. The rule was simple. Each participant needed to defeat 10 others, and once only 100 people remained, the examination would end. Because of that, Twait decided to approach the test half-heartedly and planned to defeat only 5 people. As he moved forward and spotted a boy nearby, he apologized internally for using his power against him before defeating him with ease. Afterward, he calmly remarked that only 4 more people remained. Not long after, he noticed 2 boys walking together. Suddenly, a chilling voice echoed through the area, shouting the word shadow. In the next instant, one of the boys vanished completely, leaving the other trembling in fear. Before the boy could even understand what was happening, he sensed someone appear behind him and immediately tried to strike back. However, there was nobody there. At that moment, the boy realized that he stood no chance against his opponent and decided that escaping would be his best option. Yet the moment he attempted to flee, Twait had already set a trap. An explosion suddenly erupted beneath the boy, causing him to lose his balance and collapse. It was one of Twait's bomb traps. After being defeated, the boy nervously asked whether everyone who had passed the exam was as strong as Twait. Twait casually replied that he had no idea since he was planning to join the common course instead. Hearing that left the boy completely shocked. Twait then continued forward, calmly remarking that he only needed to defeat 2 more people. Sometime later, Twait found himself caught in another chaotic situation and wondered what exactly was going on. Meanwhile, Farnez laughed loudly and declared that anyone too weak to hit her had no right to complain. Twait felt that it was unfair for an instructor to participate in the examination itself, but Farnez simply responded that life was never fair. She then boldly challenged everyone present to a battle royale. Twait could not help but think that the entire situation felt childish. Suddenly, he noticed a girl rushing toward instructor Farnez and swinging her sword at incredible speed. Twait was genuinely surprised because the way she drew her blade was so fast that an ordinary person would never have been able to follow the movement with their eyes. He immediately realized that she was likely using CQC magic to enhance her physical abilities. Despite her speed, Farnez effortlessly kicked the girl away, sending her stumbling backward. As Twait watched her stand up again, he awkwardly pointed out that her skirt had rolled up during the attack. Embarrassed, the girl immediately called him a pervert. Twait warned her that the situation was dangerous before suddenly grabbing her hand and using fixation magic to restrain her. He thought that knocking her out would quickly settle everything, and since she would become his 5th defeated opponent, he could finally end the exam for himself. However, before he could act further, the girl unexpectedly proposed that they work together to defeat the instructor. Twait questioned whether there was any benefit for him in doing so. The girl then explained that anyone who managed to defeat the instructor would receive a reward of 1 million gold, a fact that Farnez herself had announced earlier. Without hesitation, the girl offered to give the entire reward to Twait. The proposal immediately caught his attention, and he asked whether she truly did not want any reward for herself. The girl replied that she only wanted the opportunity to fight against a strong opponent. Twait instantly labeled her a battle maniac, though the girl quickly denied it and explained that she merely wished to gain experience by fighting powerful enemies for the sake of her future growth. At the same time, Twait glanced at the confident smile on Instructor Farnez's face, and it irritated him more than expected. Although he still believed the girl was somewhat battle-crazy, the hastily improvised plan she had suggested did not actually sound that bad. In the end, Twait decided to accept her offer. The girl then suggested that they calm down and discuss a proper strategy, while also asking him to release the restraints he had placed on her. However, all of a sudden, the girl effortlessly cut through the restraining threads on her own, leaving Twait genuinely surprised. She explained that if she had not tricked him into lowering his guard, they would never have been able to talk properly. At that moment, Twait realized that she was clearly experienced in dealing with situations like this. Soon after, the girl finally introduced herself as Alicia. Twait introduced himself as well, and Alicia explained that her specialty was close combat magic, particularly sword fighting in close quarters. In response, Twait explained that he specialized in long-range magic. Since Alicia would be taking the vanguard position, he suggested that she leave the supporting attacks to him from the rear. Alicia admitted that her short attack range placed her at a disadvantage in long-range battles. However, from what she had observed, Farnez also appeared to be a close-range fighter, so Twait believed they did not need to worry too much about ranged combat. Even so, Alicia remarked that if the battle somehow turned into a long-range fight, she would be relying on Twait completely. Twait agreed and mentioned that he had an idea for a strategy. After discussing their plan together, Alicia finally stepped forward to confront Farnez directly. Seeing her approach alone, Farnez looked surprised and wondered why Twait was not accompanying her. Since she had earlier seen Alicia speaking with him, Farnez had assumed the two of them would challenge her together. Alicia calmly replied that she was not interested in using such an approach. As the confrontation continued, Farnez commented that Alicia possessed excellent swordsmanship, but her strict sense of conduct and discipline was also a weakness. Alicia then questioned whether the examination was based on points and reasoned that if defeating the instructor guaranteed success, then losing points elsewhere would not matter at all. Farnez agreed with her reasoning and even guaranteed that defeating the instructor would indeed ensure passing the exam. Without hesitation, Alicia activated Grace and lunged forward with a swift thrust. However, Farnez easily blocked the strike and mocked her for being weak, reminding her that there was no time to rest during a real battle. The fight intensified immediately as Alicia launched another attack. During the exchange, Farnez was briefly surprised when Alicia created a shield using fixation magic, silently acknowledging that it had been a clever move. Alicia explained that her weapon was a magic sword and wondered whether Farnez had failed to notice it earlier. Farnez casually replied that it was merely a simple magic sword, albeit one superior to the ordinary weapons both she and Alicia normally used. However, she made it clear that she had no intention of winning simply because she possessed better equipment, so Alicia did not need to concern herself over it. Farnez also recognized Alicia's fighting style as the Sword Knight's swordsmanship. Alicia questioned whether Farnez had actually read the student's documents beforehand, since she should have recognized the style immediately if she had done so. In response, Farnez apologized and admitted that she was the only instructor who had intentionally avoided reading the student's files because she wanted the examination to remain completely fair. The very next moment, Farnez struck Alicia's shield with overwhelming force, sending her flying backward across the battlefield. As Alicia struggled to recover, Farnez coldly declared that the match was already over and that she would personally announce Alicia's failure once the examination had ended. Alicia immediately shouted in protest, declaring that she would never allow Farnez to decide whether she passed or failed. At that very moment, Farnez was suddenly struck by a sniper attack from afar. It was Twait's attack. Twait had already predicted that once Farnez discovered his location, she would be able to anticipate the direction of his shots. Because of that, he had informed Alicia beforehand about where he intended to reposition himself. He also planned to remain outside Farnez's field of vision as much as possible while continuing his assault from hidden locations. As Twait kept firing, he could not help but think that Farnez's reaction speed was almost inhuman. On top of that, her magic sword was exceptionally powerful. The fact that she could casually block his sniper shots with it made him suspect that the weapon had specifically been designed for battles of endurance and stamina. At the same time, Twait realized there were still flaws in his own sniping abilities. He thought that the current level of firepower he was producing was only possible because of the weapon he had randomly picked up earlier, though he was gradually starting to master its usage. Meanwhile, Alicia continued pressuring Farnez from the front lines while Twait supported her from a distance. Carefully observing the flow of battle, Twait began aiming directly at Farnez's sword instead of her body. After several precise shots, cracks suddenly spread across the blade. Then, with one final impact, Farnez's sword shattered completely, leaving her visibly shocked. Farnaz thought it was impossible, but Twait replied that everything now depended on Alicia. Alicia herself was surprised to see Twait continuously firing bullets at Farnaz's sword, each shot striking the exact same point. Realizing that this was the perfect opportunity, she immediately made her move. As Alicia leaped forward, Farnaz was startled and wondered if this had been their plan from the very beginning. She realized that they had intentionally forced her to block all of Twait's bullets. Before she could react further, Alicia placed her sword at Farnaz's neck and declared that the battle was over. Farnaz accepted her defeat and admitted that everything had gone well. Twait then finally stepped forward, prompting Farnaz to comment that he must have been the one using the sniper earlier. She praised his incredible skills and said that his accuracy had been truly remarkable. Twait thanked her for the compliment. Alicia then asked about the magic staff, pointing out that Twait had not possessed it when they separated earlier. Twait explained that there had been another examinee carrying a staff nearby, so he had defeated the boy and borrowed it from him. Hearing this, Alicia was shocked and questioned what he meant by borrowed, as it sounded as though he had defeated someone immediately after they split up. Twait casually confirmed it, leaving her even more stunned. Alicia recalled how Twait had earlier stated that if defeating Farnaz with a critical sniper shot proved difficult, they would simply neutralize her instead. Farnaz's swordsmanship had truly been top class, as she had managed to deflect Twait's sniper shots by skillfully adjusting the angle of her blade to reduce the burden on it. Rather than directly blocking the bullets, she had been altering their trajectories. However, Twait had realized that no matter how durable the sword was or how effectively Farnaz diverted the force, repeated attacks on the exact same spot would inevitably accumulate damage over time. Still, executing such a strategy required completely understanding the opponent's movements. While Alicia found the explanation logically sound, she still struggled to fully accept it emotionally. Once everything was over, Twait told Alicia that he would return the staff to its owner and that she could keep the prize money since he did not need it. Even then, Alicia could not help but wonder who Twait truly was. Meanwhile, the trembling boy eventually received his staff back, while Twait questioned what he was even doing there when his only goal had been to enroll in the common course. Eventually, the entrance examination came to an end. Once the results were announced, all the students gathered in the auditorium to hear them. Although Twait had technically won, he somehow still ended up failing the exam. Twait wondered how he was supposed to get the uniform for the common course. Meanwhile, a woman informed the students that those enrolled in the hero course would receive white uniforms while the students of the common course would wear black uniforms. As Twait picked up the black uniform, he quietly thought that becoming a student of the common course was exactly what he had wanted. However, the woman soon noticed him and was shocked to see him holding the black uniform. She questioned why he was wearing the attire of the common course. At that moment, a teacher entered the classroom and announced that the lesson was about to begin, instructing everyone to take their seats. She then greeted the students and introduced herself as Sylvia Makina, the instructor in charge of Class 1D in the senior department, who would also be teaching them magic arts. Sylvia explained that, as everyone already knew, the academy had opened two separate courses starting that year, the hero course and the common course. However, despite being enrolled in different divisions, students would not be completely separated from one another. In fact, many general lectures would be attended jointly by students from both courses, which was why everyone was currently gathered in the same classroom. She then expressed her hope that they would all spend the next 3 years together harmoniously. Suddenly, Alicia grabbed Twait's hand and asked him to come outside with her for a moment. The boy sitting next to Twait visibly trembled the moment he saw him leave. Once outside the classroom, Alicia insisted that they should file an official complaint regarding Twait being assigned the black uniform, since that meant he had been placed in the common course. However, Twait calmly replied that she should simply appreciate the fact that she herself had earned the white uniform of the hero department. Frustrated, Alicia shouted that it made no sense for someone like him to be placed in the common course. She also pointed out that, for some reason, she had been treated as the only person responsible for defeating Farnaz. Twait responded that it was completely fine because he had wanted to join the common course from the very beginning. At that moment, Farnaz approached them and remarked that the timing was perfect, as she had been searching for them to discuss something important. She explained that although Twait had effectively failed the exam, there was a strange reason behind it. Apparently, none of Twait's actions had been recorded by the long-range mirrors that were used to monitor the examination grounds. Alicia was left stunned as Farnaz continued explaining that, more than anyone else, she was fully aware that both Twait and Alicia had worked together to defeat her. There had even been several eyewitnesses who could confirm it. However, despite Alicia's achievements being clearly visible in the footage, Twait himself had never once appeared on the long-range mirrors. According to the recorded footage, he had not defeated a single opponent during the entire exam. Although Farnaz admitted that technical issues like this had occurred before, she emphasized that this particular case was highly abnormal. Even so, the footage was the only evidence available to the academy. She mentioned that she had already tried discussing the matter with the other examiners. At that point, Twait interrupted and casually admitted that he had deliberately avoided the long-range mirrors throughout the examination. Farnaz was shocked and commented that doing so was essentially handicapping himself. Twait simply agreed, explaining that it had become a habit of his. Both Alicia and Farnaz looked confused. while Twait silently reflected that those habits had remained with him ever since his time in the organization. After a brief silence, Alicia turned toward Farnese and anxiously asked whether that meant Twait would no longer be able to enroll in the hero course. Farnese replied that it was not entirely impossible, but he would have to wait until the following year's examination. Alicia immediately argued that Twait possessed more than enough ability to qualify for the hero course. However, Twait once again stated that he genuinely wanted to remain in the common course. He also added that he understood she was trying to help him and that he was truly grateful for her concern. Alicia quickly denied that she was doing it for his sake. As she started walking ahead toward the stairs, she admitted that she simply wanted him to join the hero course so that they could grow stronger together, which would ultimately benefit her as well. As Twait watched her leave, he quietly wondered about her true feelings. Farnese then asked whether he had ever heard about Alicia's background circumstances. When Twait shook his head, Farnese advised him to be a little more considerate toward her. She explained that Alicia's birthplace was quite unusual, and situations like hers were not uncommon within the academy. Twait remembered that the academy provided dormitories for all students, with each student receiving a private room that they were free to use however they wished. The academy truly was generous in that regard. As he arrived near the gate, he suddenly heard a loud noise and wondered what it was. Moments later, he saw a boy running toward the area before eventually tripping and collapsing onto the ground. The boy muttered that it had taken much longer to arrive than he had expected. Twait immediately approached him and asked if he was all right. The boy assured him that he was fine before sitting up and asking whether Twait was also a student at the academy. Twait confirmed it and added that they were even in the same class. Hearing that, the boy looked surprised and introduced himself as Glan Everest, mentioning that Twait had probably already heard of him. As Twait introduced himself in return, Glan's expression brightened with recognition. He exclaimed that Twait was the guy who had walked away with the beautiful girl from the hero course right after the HR session and had seemed unusually close to her despite the school having just started. Twait awkwardly explained that they had merely become acquainted during the hero course examination and that the situation had been misunderstood. Glan laughed and admitted that people often misunderstood things about him as well. Most people apparently assumed he had applied for the hero course too, likely because of his intimidating appearance. As he spoke, Glan removed his shirt to dry off the sweat covering it. Seeing his muscular build, Twait commented that Glan looked more like a veteran warrior than a student. Glan replied that he actually had stepped onto the battlefield in the past, although his time there had not lasted very long. He explained that he had withdrawn soon afterward because he could not endure the cruelty of war. According to him, while he had trained his body well, his heart had remained far too weak for such a life. He then remarked that Twait seemed to have gone through similar experiences. However, his expression changed the moment he noticed the numerous scars covering Twait's body. Glan quietly wondered where Twait had received such wounds, especially since many of them did not appear to have been caused by demons alone. Some clearly looked like injuries inflicted by humans. Twait immediately realized that letting others see those scars had been a mistake. Their circumstances were already more alike than he had expected, and it would become troublesome if Glan kept prying and eventually learned about the organization. Because of that, Twait decided he needed to forcefully cover up the truth with a lie. He casually explained that Glan had misunderstood everything. According to Twait, those scars were merely workplace injuries from his previous job in the cleaning industry before entering the academy. He claimed that he had been helping with his family's business, which essentially made him a town janitor. Glan stared at him in disbelief and questioned how a janitor could possibly receive such terrible wounds. Twait replied that someone like Glan, who came from a military background, would never understand the hardships of cleaning work. He exaggerated further, claiming that removing stubborn stains was far more difficult than most people could imagine, especially when the stains were hidden in troublesome places unnoticed by ordinary people. According to Twait, injuries like those were simply part of the business. Glan nodded with a serious expression and commented that it truly sounded like an incredibly difficult job. He admitted that he had never imagined toilet cleaning could be so dangerous. After finally understanding what he believed to be Twait's circumstances, Glan advised him not to casually expose his body to others anymore. Twait agreed and replied that he would be more careful in the future. The scene shifted to the classroom, where Sylphia began explaining that half a year earlier, the fourth hero, Cheyenne, had successfully defeated the Demon Lord, bringing the fourth great demon-human war to an end. She then asked the class if anyone could explain which forces, aside from the hero party itself, had contributed to the subjugation of the Demon Lord. A boy named Sieg raised his hand and Sylphia allowed him to answer. Sieg explained that, apart from the kingdom's army, both the Royal Knights and the True Luminous Knight Order of Tergan Tachi had taken the lead in supporting the hero party during the war. Sylphia agreed and commented that the True Luminous Knight Order had achieved remarkable accomplishments on the battlefield. She added that although the death of their captain had deeply saddened many people, the achievements they left behind were stories that deserved to be passed down to future generations. She then asked whether anyone knew about the Knight Orders from other nations that had also participated in the war. Sieg hesitated at the question while Twait quietly reflected on which Knight Order had stood out the most during his own time on the battlefield. Noticing Sieg's silence, Sylphia turned toward Twait and asked him to continue from where Sieg had stopped. Twait calmly answered that the Holy Arcadia Knights of the Arcadia Kingdom, the Silver, Ruby, and Sapphire Knight Orders, as well as the Brilliant Knight Order of the Stanley Empire had all contributed greatly to the war effort. He further explained that even the Demon Kingdom of Farum had deployed its Dragon Hunter Knight Order to assist the hero party. Sylphia nodded in approval and remarked that the fact Twait even knew about the Dragon Hunter Knights proved he was quite studious. She also explained that even among the demons, there had been factions who opposed the Demon Lord and had eventually joined forces with humanity. The class looked impressed by Twait's knowledge, but Sieg appeared visibly irritated by the attention he received. Sometime later, after the teacher left the classroom, Twait remained seated alone when Sieg approached him with a hostile expression. Sieg warned him not to get ahead of himself, claiming that Twait was merely a common course student, a failure who had been unable to enter the hero course. According to Sieg, just because they shared the same classroom did not mean they were equals. Twait quietly noticed the age gap and difference in maturity between them but chose not to respond aggressively. Sieg then turned toward Lisa and asked whether she agreed with him. Lisa awkwardly replied that she supposed so, though she clearly seemed uncomfortable with the situation. After Sieg eventually left, Lisa admitted that she still did not fully understand what kind of stance Twait was trying to maintain. She wondered whether he truly intended to keep hiding his real strength. Twait explained that he simply did not want to expose himself more than necessary, although that did not mean he would refuse to act whenever he genuinely needed to. Lisa pointed out that if he had truly wanted to hide his abilities completely, he would never have defeated a teacher during the entrance examination. Afterward, Lisa suddenly asked whether Twait would become her personal training partner. Twait questioned the purpose behind such training, and Lisa immediately answered that she simply wanted to become stronger. When Twait asked what she intended to do after gaining strength, Lisa replied that there were many reasons for it. However, Twait responded that the era of war had already ended, and strength for the sake of fighting was no longer necessary. He believed she should value peace instead. Even so, Lisa firmly insisted that she still wanted to grow stronger, explaining that this desire was the very reason she had enrolled in the academy. Twait realized that her determination towards strength bordered on obsession. Although he still knew very little about her, he understood that becoming her training partner would inevitably reveal more about her circumstances. The problem, however, was that Twait feared it would interfere with the peaceful and ordinary life he wanted to live. He disliked getting deeply involved with people whose lives carried unusual complications, and Lisa clearly seemed to be dealing with something far from normal. Because of that, Twait gently apologized and declined her offer. Lisa looked slightly saddened but calmly accepted his decision, remarking that it was unfortunate, though she had expected such an answer from the start. She also explained that she had no intention of forcing her personal values onto someone else because she was not a child anymore. Surprised by how maturely she handled the rejection, Twait suggested that they could still remain ordinary friends. Lisa looked slightly startled by the proposal, and Twait continued by saying that friendships did not need to revolve around profit, loss, or mutual benefit. Lisa smiled softly and agreed. The two then shook hands, officially settling the matter as friends rather than training partners. Twait apologized once again and admitted that he had reacted somewhat harshly earlier because he had briefly panicked. He explained that techniques and habits learned during times of crisis could not simply disappear overnight, and although he did not fully understand her thoughts, he believed she should avoid rushing herself too much. Lisa thanked him sincerely for the advice. At that moment, Glan suddenly appeared once again, looking irritated as he accused Twait of openly flirting with girls ever since school had started. Though Twait denied most of it, Glan insisted that the atmosphere between them had definitely felt flirtatious. More importantly, he immediately turned toward Alicia and enthusiastically asked if they could become friends as well. Alicia simply smiled and agreed, expressing her hope that all of them would get along together from then on. Once the class began, Sylphia explained that magic in their world was mainly classified into 5 types. The first was close-quarter combat magic, followed by close-quarter support magic. The third category was long-range shooting magic, the fourth was long-range support magic, and the last was fixed-point setup magic. She further explained that terms such as close quarter, long range, and fixed point setup merely referred to the range of the magic, while combat and shooting described its purpose and application. For that day's practical lesson, the students would be training in long-range shooting magic. More specifically, they would be participating in the target practice, and everyone was free to use a wand that best suited their individual style. At that moment, a girl hesitantly asked whether students from the common course were also required to participate in the training. Sylphia apologized and explained that she might have caused a misunderstanding. She clarified that the purpose of target practice was not for the students to acquire long-range shooting magic itself, but rather to teach them how to control their magic properly. She added that target practice was one of the best ways to determine how refined a person's magical control truly was. To demonstrate, Sylphia created a bird-like figure from a liquid substance and explained that the technique was a type of magic known as alchemy. For convenience, it was generally classified as close-quarter combat magic, although professionals in the field mostly used it for industrial purposes rather than for combat like knights or adventurers. She further stated that it was a form of magic that greatly benefited people in their everyday lives. Afterward, she transformed the substance into bullets and fired them toward a target. She explained that at the very least, everyone needed to be capable of hitting a target accurately. As Twait watched her strike the center of the target with perfect precision, while also recalling Farnez's swordsmanship, he found himself wondering whether both of them had once been mentors of the fourth hero. Soon after, the mentor of the fourth hero, Sylvia, instructed everyone to begin practicing and reminded them to use D-rank magic or higher. Twait then called out to Sylvia, causing her to ask whether something was wrong. He requested permission to use bullet magic instead. Sylvia appeared confused and explained that bullet was the simplest form of long-range shooting magic and was only ranked E-class. She advised him to use the lesson to practice higher-ranked D-class spells such as water ball or fireball instead. Twait quietly agreed and stepped away while thinking that E-rank magic was considered beginner-level magic that could usually be learned within a few days. Even children who had just enrolled in elementary school were taught such magic at the very beginning. Because of that, he realized that using it now would likely make him stand out in a rather embarrassing way. Twait overheard several students praising Alicia for her exceptional skill in magic casting. During the mock battle conducted among the Hero Course students, she had completely overwhelmed her opponents and was already being recognized as the strongest first-year student. The students also remarked that the rumor about her defeating a teacher during the entrance examination was apparently true. As Twait listened to the admiration surrounding her, he felt that Alicia had practically become a celebrity within the academy. Soon, it became Twait's turn to practice. He stepped in front of the targets and attempted to cast Fireball, but the spell failed to even reach the target and disappeared midway through the air. The sight left everyone stunned for a moment before the entire class burst into laughter. The students mocked him for failing to make the spell reach the target and ridiculed him by saying that he could not even properly use E-rank magic. Some of them sarcastically commented that the Common Core students never failed to entertain them. Twait quietly realized that they had begun openly trash-talking him. Eventually, it became Sieg's turn, and he coldly told Twait to step aside. Glan immediately grew irritated at Sieg's attitude and argued that it was still Twait's turn to practice, making Sieg's behavior seem unnecessarily rude. However, Sieg responded that no matter how much a Common Core student practiced, it would only amount to a waste of time. Glan was about to argue further, but Twait stopped him and admitted that Sieg was right about him lacking the necessary ability. Afterward, Glan angrily slammed his hand against the table before returning to his seat. He muttered that the Hero Corps students were becoming more arrogant with each passing day. Twait commented that he had assumed Glan disliked fighting altogether, but Glan replied that it was actually the opposite. Twait then remarked that it would have been easier to simply ignore that kind of harassment. However, Glan responded that the unpleasant feeling would not disappear so easily and that he could never truly let such things go. Not wanting to dwell on the matter any longer, Glan suggested that they at least have some fun after school by trying to pick up girls. Twait felt confused after hearing Glan's explanation. Once school ended, the two of them went to stand near the academy gate while Glan explained that the capital was filled with girls and that the key to picking them up was to act experienced and confident as though it was something they had done countless times before. He further explained that if Twait behaved like that in the countryside, people would criticize him for being frivolous and unreliable. However, things were different in the capital. According to Glan, women there were more likely to trust someone who appeared confident and experienced because they assumed they would be able to enjoy themselves with that person. After explaining all of that, Glan turned toward Twait and asked whether he understood what he meant. Twait reluctantly agreed with Glan's explanation. Glan then told him to keep watching, claiming that he would demonstrate everything properly. A moment later, Glan suddenly disappeared, leaving Twait standing there alone. As he waited, Twait found himself thinking that it was actually his first time casually going out with someone after school. That thought reminded him of the Special Mission Army organization, which had been disbanded after the final battle. Following that, he had enrolled in the academy to live as an ordinary 15-year-old boy. However, even after spending a week there, his life had merely shifted from constant training and dangerous missions to lessons and academy routines. In truth, his daily life did not feel very different from the time he had spent within the organization. Since he had finally been given the chance to live a new life as Twait, he began to think that perhaps he should actively seek out experiences he had never been able to enjoy before. While thinking about that, he noticed Glan approaching a girl and casually calling out to her as Missy before asking whether he could have a moment of her time. However, the girl became frightened, slapped him, and called him a pervert. When Glan eventually returned, Twait stared at him in confusion and questioned what exactly that demonstration had been supposed to prove. Glan shamelessly replied that everything had gone perfectly according to his mental preparation. Twait then wondered if that meant Glan only ever succeeded in imaginary stories. Ignoring the comment, Glan declared that he would attempt a second try. Unfortunately, the second attempt ended no better than the first, and he received another slap. Afterward, Glan insisted that it was finally Twait's turn. Twait admitted that he genuinely did not understand why he should try, but Glan argued that things would naturally go differently because the two of them were together, and claimed that Twait was simply too naive. At that point, Twait thought that since he had already come that far, he might as well try talking to someone himself. Glan immediately became excited and hid behind a nearby bush while telling Twait that if things seemed to be going well, he should find the perfect opportunity to introduce Glan as well. As Twait walked forward, he recalled advice once given to him by a colleague from the organization. The man had explained that picking up girls was less about forcing a conversation and more about making the other person feel comfortable while patiently waiting for the right opportunity. Believing it was time to test that advice, Twait politely approached a girl and excused himself to get her attention. The girl turned toward him and asked what he wanted. Noticing her suspicious expression, Twait realized he needed to say something that would lower her guard. His eyes then fell upon her earrings, prompting him to ask whether they were from the Arcadia Kingdom. The girl seemed surprised, but confirmed that they were. Twait casually mentioned that he had once visited Arcadia himself. As he observed her reaction, he noticed that her expression visibly relaxed, making him realize that the best approach was to create a natural and comfortable atmosphere. While speaking with her, Twait quietly observed several details. He noticed traces of mud that still remained on her shoes despite being wiped clean, along with marks on her arms that suggested she had carried heavy luggage for a long period of time. He had also seen her entering from outside the castle walls. Since the last rainfall had occurred 2 days earlier, and there was no mud left within the town itself, Twait deduced that she must have recently traveled from outside the capital. Because of that, he asked whether she had come to the capital for sightseeing. The girl nodded and revealed that she had wanted to visit the city to commemorate the recent victory. Twait continued the conversation by asking whether she had only recently arrived in the capital, since it must have been quite a long journey. The girl agreed and explained that the trip had taken even longer because the carriage had been delayed by the rain 2 days earlier. She also complained that her shoes had become completely covered in mud during the journey, making the experience miserable. Twait apologized for pointing it out, but remarked that her boots were indeed quite dirty. The girl awkwardly admitted that entering the castle in such shoes was probably inappropriate. Twait agreed and explained that although the castle was currently open to tourists, it was still considered a dignified place. He then offered to guide her to a nearby shoe shop if she wanted. The girl's expression brightened immediately, and she happily accepted the offer. At that moment, Twait thought that all he needed to do now was maintain a pleasant expression. He smiled gently before apologetically explaining that he was actually with a friend and asking whether it would be all right to bring him along as well. The girl agreed without much hesitation, but the moment Glan approached and awkwardly introduced himself in an overly strange manner, the girl immediately became uncomfortable and ran away. Glan apologized while commenting that Twait truly seemed talented at picking up girls, and even Twait himself felt surprised by how naturally the conversation had gone. He quietly assumed that it was probably because of the experience he had gained in his former occupation. Glan jokingly guessed that Twait's previous work as a town janitor must have involved dealing with all kinds of people. Despite the failure, Twait decided to give it one more try. Glan became strangely emotional and declared that he had never realized how wonderful it was to have Twait as a friend. Twait immediately replied that he had never felt a stronger urge to cut ties with Glan than he did at that very moment. A little later, Glan noticed a girl standing nearby and remarked that she somehow looked familiar. He then urged Twait to approach her as well. Twait walked over and politely excused himself. After looking at his face, the girl asked whether there was some kind of problem. Twait asked if she knew of a nearby place where he could sit down and rest for a while. He explained that he had only recently arrived in the capital, had become lost, and was already exhausted from walking around all day. The girl thought for a moment before giving him directions, telling him to continue straight along the central road. However, Twait admitted that he was not familiar with the area at all. Seeing his troubled expression, the girl kindly offered to guide him there personally. Twait was surprised that things were progressing even better than he had expected, so he asked whether it was really all right for her to help a stranger like that. The girl replied that she could not simply ignore someone who was clearly in trouble. Hearing that, Twait decided that once they reached the shop, he would thank her properly by treating her to anything she wanted. The girl hesitated for a moment and awkwardly excused herself, saying that she wanted to discuss it with her friend first. Twait became confused by the response, while the girl repeated that she genuinely wanted to consult her friend before deciding anything further. When they finally arrived at the shop, Twait was surprised to discover that the girl's friend was actually Alicia. After understanding that Twait had offered to treat them to anything they wanted, both girls sat down with him and Glan. As soon as they settled into their seats, Alicia bluntly admitted that she was extremely disappointed in him. Twait awkwardly explained that whether they believed him or not, it had genuinely been the first time in his entire life that he had ever tried to pick up girls. However, Alicia found that impossible to believe, while Mize admitted that she had honestly thought Twait was truly in trouble when he approached her earlier. Both Twait and Glan immediately apologized for misleading them. Trying to ease the awkward atmosphere, Twait asked what the two girls had been doing outside together. While casually sipping her drink, Alicia questioned whether Twait was simply trying to change the topic. However, she eventually decided to let the matter slide after Twait reminded them that he was at least treating them to drinks. Alicia then stated that she would let him off the hook this time. Soon afterward, Twait wondered how the three of them had managed to remember each other's faces so easily despite only recently becoming classmates. At that point, Garv suddenly mentioned Mize's name, leaving Twait shocked. After realizing that Mize had actually been in the same class as him all along, he quietly thought that the reason she had seemed familiar earlier was probably because he had become careless about memorizing people's faces after losing his constant sense of danger from his former life. Glan admitted that he himself had not realized it was Mize at first either. However, he added that it was usually impossible for people not to notice her because she was considered the ideal student among the Common Core students. Not only was she exceptionally beautiful, but she also aspired to become an adventurer, despite how dangerous the profession was, which made many people admire her determination. Alicia also commented that she respected how clearly Mize had set her goals for the future. Embarrassed by the praise, Mize shyly asked them to stop talking about her, especially since she had failed to enter the hero course. Twait then questioned Glan about why he had not warned him earlier if he had recognized Mize from the beginning. Glan casually replied that he had thought Twait might actually succeed in winning her over. Alicia immediately frowned at that comment and bluntly called Glan a lowlife. Afterward, she turned her attention toward Twait and said there was something she genuinely wanted to ask him. Alicia then directly questioned why Twait had been deliberately holding back his abilities during the practical magic lessons earlier that day. Twait replied that it was all he could do and that he had not been holding back his power. He further explained that if his sniper ability was truly that good, it would not make sense for him to be unable to use a fireball spell below D rank. Twait stated that the only long-range shooting spells he could use were the sniper and bullet spells. She wondered if he was saying that he could only use 2 spells. Twait agreed that at least when it came to long-range magic, shooting spells were the only ones he could use. As for the other types of magic, it was not that he was incapable of using them, but rather that he had never learned them. He thought that under normal circumstances, even the soldiers of the organization learned more spells, but in his case, the instructors had told him that those 2 spells were more than enough. Alicia was even more surprised that, despite all of that, Twait had still managed to defeat the instructor during the entrance exam. The other 2 students were shocked upon hearing this, and Glan wondered whether Alicia had not been the one who defeated the instructor alone. Alicia commented that she was tired of explaining it repeatedly and clarified that the person who had actually defeated the instructor was Twait. Twait remarked that such an explanation might be slightly misleading since, strictly speaking, the result had come from both of them working together. At that moment, they heard the sound of a boy shouting angrily at someone, demanding to know how they had dared to commit such insolence. The voice belonged to the eldest son of Baron Felchian. When Twait and the others came outside, they discovered that the commotion involved Sieg. Alicia commented that he somehow kept running into his classmates on the very same day. Meanwhile, Mize wondered what was going to happen next. The shop owner explained that Sieg had broken one of his items and stated that he at least expected compensation for the damage. Sieg became angry and argued that a sword which broke from a mere test swing was not worth compensating for. The shop owner pleaded with him not to say such things, reminding him that he had clearly explained beforehand that the sword was only meant to be decorative. Upon hearing the situation, Twait remarked that from the way he saw it, Sieg was in the wrong. Alicia agreed, commenting that decorative swords were often even more expensive than ordinary ones, which was why the shop owner refused to back down even against a noble. Twait then asked her to calm down, pointing out that the situation had not yet escalated to the point where she needed to interfere. However, Alicia replied that it soon would, adding that nobles like Sieg, who only cared about their personal interests, would kill people without hesitation. Sieg then drew his sword, claiming that the people of the capital had failed to understand their place. He declared that he would personally teach them what happened when someone picked a fight against a noble. At that moment, Alicia called out to him. Sieg appeared surprised and commented that it was quite a coincidence to meet her there. Alicia shouted that what he was about to do could only be called murder. Sieg denied the accusation and insisted that it was merely punishment. Glan also stepped forward and shouted that Sieg was not the one who had the authority to decide such matters. Alicia agreed with Glan, adding that Sieg's actions would only disturb the peace of the capital. Sieg then questioned why they were even there. He mockingly remarked that Twait was nothing more than a failure who could not even use a D-rank spell and called him the very epitome of the Common Core students. He further claimed that if they continued to associate with someone like Twait, their own worth would eventually be questioned as well. He then told them to leave the place. After that, Sieg turned his attention toward Alicia and remarked that although she was a commoner, they were both students of the hero class, and he acknowledged her talent. He then offered to teach her how to choose her acquaintances properly. Reminding her that he was the heir of a baron and fully confident in his ability to judge people, Sieg extended his hand toward her and asked her to join him. She commented that Sieg's confidence was far from reliable and insisted that Twait was stronger than him. Sieg became irritated and claimed that those common course students had deceived her and clouded her judgment. He then unleashed his power and warned Twait not to become arrogant, declaring that he would erase him. Twait immediately sensed the danger and dispelled Sieg's spell, leaving Sieg shocked and unable to understand what had just happened. Twait calmly stated that he had merely stopped the activation of Sieg's spell and forced him to sheath his sword. He even warned Sieg not to cause trouble again in the future. Sieg grew even angrier and shouted at Twait not to order him around. Twait replied that Sieg had already been warned. The next moment, he fired a bullet spell at Sieg's hand. The attack caused Sieg immense pain, and in fury, he threatened to kill Twait. Sieg's two companions quickly dragged him away in order to stop the bleeding from his injured hand. Before they could leave, Twait stopped them and remarked that there was still something they needed to do first. He reminded them that they still had to pay for the broken sword. Sieg angrily threw a pouch of money toward the shop owner and declared that Twait had merely been lucky this time, warning him that he would not get away with it in the future. Afterward, Alicia approached Twait and asked what kind of spell he had just used. Twait explained that it was nothing more than the E-rank spell bullet, although he had customized it to focus entirely on speed and piercing power. Alicia remarked that no matter how much a spell was customized, bullet was still merely a spell that fired a lump of mana at an enemy. She could not understand how Sieg had failed to block it, nor had she ever seen anything so extreme before. She admitted that she truly could not understand what kind of person Twait really was. Twait simply replied that he was nothing more than a former town janitor. By the next day, Glan approached Twait cheerfully and suggested that they go grab something to eat together, mentioning that he would head to the cafeteria first. Twait agreed, and after Glan left, he glanced toward Sieg's seat, noticing that it was vacant. Twait recalled that because of what Sieg had done the previous day, he had ended up blowing a hole through Sieg's hand. However, he assumed the injury would likely heal overnight with the help of recovery magic, and Sieg had probably decided to avoid any risks by resting for another day. As Twait stood up to leave, Alicia approached him and commented that Sieg was absent. Twait agreed, admitting that he had expected Sieg to show up and try causing trouble again. Alicia replied that she could not say for certain, but Sieg's behavior the previous day had been completely abnormal. She then asked Twait where he usually had lunch. Twait answered that he normally ate in the cafeteria, and Alicia decided to join him. Meanwhile, Mies was already eating there with her friends that day. While they were walking, Twait mentioned that he had been meaning to ask something and wondered whether Alicia had any friends in the hero course. Alicia frowned slightly and remarked that the question sounded rather rude. She then sarcastically asked if he had concluded that she was a loner. She immediately denied it, insisting that it was simply called being independent. Twait could already make a reasonable guess based on what had happened with Sieg, since many of the hero course students insulted the common course students as though it were completely natural. Alicia added that she disliked those attitudes and had no interest in befriending people who participated in such conversations. Twait knew that since that year, the academy had been divided into the hero course and the common course, even giving them different uniforms. The hero course students openly looked down on the common course students, something everyone in the academy was aware of. Still, there were a few people like Alicia who believed in treating the common course students with respect despite belonging to the hero course themselves. As they walked, Alicia suddenly pointed out that Twait's collar looked messy. Twait replied that he had intentionally left it that way because many other students dressed similarly. Alicia looked confused by his response, while Twait admitted that he had only recently realized that he would never have thought that way in the past. Alicia then asked if Twait had truly been a town janitor before enrolling in the academy. Twait confirmed that he had been. Alicia commented that town janitors were surprisingly well educated in manners. Twait replied that if his superior had ever seen his collar in such disorder, his head would practically have been sent flying. Alicia was shocked and wondered whether the job had really been that strict. Twait, however, was not exaggerating, as it had literally been the case for him. She stepped closer to him and remarked that being properly dressed suited him much better. After saying that, she reached out and began fixing his collar, telling him not to move. Even while she was standing so close to him, Twait showed almost no reaction. Alicia became slightly annoyed and asked whether he had no interest in the opposite gender at all. Twait looked confused and questioned what she was suddenly talking about. Alicia explained that in situations like that, boys would normally become at least a little embarrassed, and she insisted that he should react that way too. Twait innocently pointed out that she was merely adjusting his collar. Alicia quickly denied it, saying that they were standing so close that it almost looked as if they were about to kiss. Realizing how close they actually were, she hurriedly stepped back, her face turning red with embarrassment. At that moment, Twait casually commented that her eyelashes were quite long. Hearing that only made Alicia even more flustered, and she stepped back further. Twait then remarked that if she was going to blush so much, she probably should not have done something like that in the first place. Alicia replied that she had not expected him to say something like that. Twait wondered whether she did not want him to say such things so casually. Slightly annoyed, Alicia replied that it was all his fault. She explained that although she had been speaking with him normally, he still had a side to him that she did not fully understand, and that only made her want to uncover it somehow. Twait assumed that it was simply human nature. He remarked that he had already formed a certain impression of her in his mind and asked what kind of person she thought he was. Alicia bluntly answered that he seemed like a shady person. Twait, however, gave no reply to that remark. By the next day, while Twait was in class, Sieg finally returned. He immediately approached Twait and challenged him to a duel, leaving the entire class surprised. Sieg continued by reminding Twait not to forget what he had done a few days earlier. He declared that Twait was merely a commoner who had committed insolence against a noble, the heir of the Falchion household. Twait understood that Sieg was clearly trying to provoke another fight. Alicia quickly stepped in and questioned whether Sieg had forgotten the Academy's rules. She reminded him that during their time at the Academy, social status held no meaning, and that nobles, commoners, and even royalty were all considered equal as students. Sieg angrily told her to stay quiet, claiming that he had only been tolerant toward her because they belonged to the same course. He then accused her of becoming far too arrogant and moved as though he were about to strike her. Suddenly, another boy intervened and stopped Sieg, warning him that the next time he would not simply restrain his hand so lightly. Twait thought that no matter how anyone looked at it, he and the others had done nothing wrong. However, he also realized that if Sieg continued behaving recklessly like that, innocent students might eventually get dragged into the conflict as well. Because of that, Twait stepped forward and apologized to Sieg, saying that his behavior might have been somewhat offensive and asked him to let the matter slide. Sieg, however, flatly refused. He declared that he intended to humiliate Twait in front of everyone. Hearing that made Twait genuinely irritated. Sieg further explained that he needed to make an example out of Twait so that commoners like him would not continue appearing in the future. He added that any nail which stuck out had to be hammered down. Sieg's two companions immediately agreed with him. Twait realized that Sieg simply wanted revenge because his pride and reputation had been damaged by their previous encounter. In the end, Twait concluded that Sieg was merely throwing a childish tantrum out of wounded pride. Upon hearing the word revenge, Alicia stepped forward and urged Twait to accept the duel. Twait wondered why she had suddenly changed her mind. Alicia had no intention of standing up for Sieg, but the nobles had become increasingly persistent after convincing themselves that their reputation had been damaged. She believed that if Twait rejected the duel, the matter could eventually snowball into something far more troublesome later on. Twait thought that perhaps he should consider himself fortunate that Sieg had chosen to settle the matter through a duel. In the end, he accepted the challenge, which made Sieg visibly pleased. News of the duel quickly spread throughout the class as students learned that a duel would take place between a hero course student and a common course student. Twait initially thought that he might intentionally lose the duel. However, Alicia told him that he could not do that, as she knew he had no intention of pretending to be incapable when he actually possessed the ability. As Twait reflected on the situation, he realized that he had made a hasty decision. Alicia remarked that he had dug his own grave with his own hands, adding that she would finally be able to see what he had been hiding. Twait began to suspect that her true intention from the very beginning had been to uncover his real powers. Although Alicia acted as if she knew nothing, she was clearly curious about him and wanted to learn more. Twait felt as though he had unintentionally attracted the attention of a troublesome woman. Ideally, he did not want to provoke Sieg any further, which was why he had originally planned to lose the duel, believing it would be the simplest solution. However, he also understood that the outcome of the duel could become a trigger, not only for Sieg, but also for the other Hero Course students to grow even more arrogant. His defeat could ultimately widen the gap between the Hero Course and the Common Course students even further. Sieg asked whether Twait had finished preparing himself. As Twait stepped forward to face him, he admitted to himself that he would not feel satisfied if such consequences truly came to pass. Alicia volunteered to act as the referee and asked Sieg whether he had any objections. Sieg replied that he had none, although Twait found it somewhat strange that he agreed so easily. Alicia then explained that the duel would continue until one side surrendered or became incapable of fighting. Once both participants signaled that they were ready, she gave the order to begin. At that moment, Sieg summoned a staff called Kaiser, Astonishing everyone present, he mockingly called Twait a foolish Common Core student and claimed that someone like him would never recognize such a weapon. Sieg then explained that Kaiser was a magic staff once employed by the Royal Army during the Fourth Great Hero-Demon War and was considered a military-grade weapon. Twait immediately realized that Sieg had been absent the previous day in order to prepare and acquire such a powerful staff. As the duel began, Twait moved forward while Sieg launched a lightning spear at him. Twait dodged the attack with ease. Sieg continued attacking relentlessly, firing multiple strikes in succession. Twait paused briefly and wondered whether Sieg truly intended to take the duel to such violent extremes. Sieg coldly remarked that accidents were commonplace during duels. He then turned toward Alicia, calling her an imprudent girl, and declared that he would never forgive her. However, he added that there was no need for her to worry because he intended to handle her with far more care than Twait ever had. Sieg shamelessly remarked that Alicia was too beautiful to kill wastefully. He went on to utter disgraceful words, claiming that he would take his time tormenting her and enjoy watching her slowly stop breathing. Twait called Sieg a lowlife, which immediately enraged him. Sieg declared that such behavior was not disgraceful but rather a privilege. He arrogantly claimed that people like him risked their lives fighting the Demon King in order to protect peace for ordinary people such as Glan. However, Twait could never approve of such twisted reasoning, nor could he acknowledge someone like Sieg. Fueled by anger, Sieg unleashed even more power and declared that it was time to end the battle. Laughing like a madman, he boasted that the power of Kaiser allowed him to cast magic in rapid succession, insisting that someone like Twait stood no chance against it. At last, Twait noticed an opening and rushed forward. At that moment, he realized there was one thing Sieg did not know. Twait had seen that staff many times before on the battlefield. He knew exactly how it functioned. Although Kaiser was capable of rapid-fire magic attacks, its internal structure became exposed whenever it vented excess heat. Twait also knew that if that exposed section received even slight damage, the entire staff would easily break down. Taking advantage of that weakness, Twait fired a bullet directly at the exposed section. The attack struck its target perfectly, causing the staff to explode in Sieg's hands. Sieg was blasted backward and collapsed several meters away. Before he could recover, Twait placed a small dagger against him and warned him not to move. He coldly reminded Sieg that if he were to die under the current circumstances, no one would suspect Twait, because, as Sieg himself had said earlier, accidents were commonplace in duels. Then demanded that Sieg stop interfering with them and abandon his discriminatory behavior toward Common Core students. He further ordered him to ensure that his followers did the same. Twait remarked that perhaps Sieg should learn something from Alicia for once. Sieg was completely stunned by the sudden turn of events, but before he could say anything, a sharp pain coursed through him. Twait interrupted him immediately and stated that he did not intend to let him speak freely. According to Twait, the only acceptable answer Sieg was permitted to give was yes. Twait then repeated his demands once more and warned Sieg to think very carefully before answering if he valued the rest of his life. As Twait glared coldly at him, Sieg became visibly terrified. The duel was ultimately cancelled due to the sudden explosion. Because the match had been interrupted by what was officially considered an accident, the decision regarding the winner and loser was postponed indefinitely. Although the hostility between the Hero Course and the Common Course students still remained, neither side made any reckless moves afterward. Any careless action could further provoke the Hero Course students and lead to unnecessary backlash, so it was considered best to leave the situation as it was for the time being. As a result, Twait was finally able to regain a semblance of his ordinary life. Sometime later, Twait went out to meet Chris. During their conversation, she wondered whether a rift had truly formed between the Hero Course and the Common Course students. Twait agreed and reflected on the origins of the conflict. During the Hero-Demon War, when the fate of the entire world had been at stake, the countries had established an organization that operated from the shadows to support the heroes. That organization had been known as the Special Mission Army Organization. However, when the hero ultimately failed to defeat the Demon King, Twait himself had been dispatched to eliminate the threat and bring the war to an end. After the organization fulfilled its purpose, it was eventually dissolved. Thanks to the kindness and influence of his former superior, Twait had been granted the opportunity to live an ordinary life afterward. That was how he had assumed the identity of Twait and enrolled in the academy. Unfortunately, he soon realized that ordinary life was far less peaceful than he had originally imagined. Twait then asked Chris why she had come to see him. She replied that she simply wanted to check on him and make sure he was enjoying his academy life. She added that she felt responsible for him, which was why she wanted to see how he was doing. She then asked whether he had managed to make any friends. Twait answered that he had, mentioning that he had recently gone out with a friend whose hobby seemed to revolve around picking up girls. Chris was completely shocked after hearing that. Twait casually added that despite how it sounded, he actually had quite a talent for attracting girls. Chris looked utterly bewildered and admitted that she could not wrap her head around what she was hearing. She even tried covering her ears as if refusing to accept it. Watching her reaction, Twait remarked that people naturally changed in order to adapt to new environments. He also admitted that he had been enjoying those changes himself. Chris developed increasingly complicated feelings about the entire situation and even started regretting recommending the academy to him in the first place. Twait then asked whether things had been going smoothly on her side as well. Chris replied that everything was fine and explained that she had been assigned work similar to her previous duties. Twait wondered whether she was now working for a bureau. During the Great War, the organization they had once served under had operated beneath a parent organization known as the Royal Defense Intelligence Bureau. The bureau had been responsible for protecting the kingdom from conflicts between humans. Even though the Demon Lord had been defeated, disputes and struggles between people still continued throughout the world. Twait jokingly remarked that after dealing with the Demon Lord, she now had to deal with humans instead, which sounded rather depressing. Chris agreed and admitted that the work had become exhausting and unpleasant. She also mentioned that Twait's beloved sniper wand was currently being held under the Bureau's custody. Twait asked whether someone else had inherited it. Chris immediately denied it, explaining that no one else was capable of using the weapon properly besides Twait. In the first place, the sniper wand had been specially created as Twait's personal weapon. Twait then asked her honestly whether the Bureau had originally intended for him to continue working under them after the organization had been dismantled. Chris admitted that it had been true, but revealed that she herself had objected to the idea. When Twait asked why, she reminded him of what she had once told him before, that he deserved to live his own life freely. Twait thanked her sincerely and said that it was because of her decision that he was finally able to experience something called an ordinary life. He jokingly added that he might even have proposed to her if she had been closer to his age. Chris became annoyed and immediately protested that she was not that much older than him. A short while later, Chris received after speaking for some time, she informed Twait that she needed to return to work immediately. Twait became curious and asked what kind of assignment she had received. Chris replied that it was not a problem to tell him. She explained that Robert, the second son of Duke Turgand, would soon arrive while leading the Real Luminous Order. Twait recalled that the Real Luminous Order belonged to the Duke's household and was infamous for judging people solely based on their attributes. Chris further explained that her group had been assigned as Robert's bodyguards. Twait was surprised and questioned whether such a responsibility should normally belong to the Night Order instead. Chris explained that Robert was an extremely cynical person. Since the war had only recently ended and the world remained unstable, his caution was understandable. She added that once Robert safely arrived in the royal capital, their mission would be complete. Twait then asked why the order was coming to the royal capital in the first place. Chris immediately fell silent and teasingly remarked that she would keep that information secret for now. However, she hinted that a major event would soon take place and told Twait to look forward to it. She also mentioned that the academy would likely become heavily involved in the event as well. Twait found himself wondering what kind of large-scale event could possibly involve the academy so deeply. After parting ways with Chris and beginning his walk back, Twait noticed Alicia sitting alone on a bench with a gloomy expression. Concerned, he approached her and asked whether something was wrong. He also questioned whether Sieg had done something to her again. Alicia quietly shook her head and explained that after the duel, Sieg had become strangely docile, almost as though he had turned into an entirely different person. Twait commented that Alicia might feel better if she simply let her emotions out. He explained that, in the past, he himself had gone through periods when he was emotionally unstable. However, during those difficult times, a close acquaintance had always been there to counsel and support him, which had helped him endure everything. Alicia wondered whether that close acquaintance happened to be the beautiful woman Twait had met outside the academy earlier. Twait calmly admitted that it was indeed her. Alicia then teasingly asked whether Twait happened to like older women. Twait merely stared at her expression without answering immediately. Noticing his reaction, Alicia shifted the conversation and mentioned that Sieg had claimed the duel was his form of revenge. She then asked Twait whether he believed revenge itself was something ridiculous. Twait looked at her and wondered whether she was asking if revenge was good or bad. He said that he would not call it ridiculous because the desire for revenge could sometimes give a person a reason to keep living. Alicia wondered if that meant he was not against revenge itself, and Twait replied that he was not against the concept of revenge. However, she still seemed confused, so Twait explained that people who pursued revenge often developed a self-destructive mindset. They usually failed to think about what would come after achieving their revenge, and some of them did not even care if they died in the process. Alicia questioned whether it was really necessary to think about what came after revenge if the person had already achieved their goal. Twait replied that revenge was merely an attempt to recover what had been lost, and even if it succeeded, it only brought the person back to zero rather than giving them anything meaningful. He further explained that there would still be many days ahead in life, yet some people ended up giving up on life entirely after achieving their revenge. He asked Alicia if she did not find such an outcome tragic. Alicia admitted that she did find it sad, and Twait continued honestly, saying that in Sieg's case, revenge had been worth it. If he had lost the duel, the Hero Corps students would have become even more uncontrollable than before. Putting aside the question of morality, Twait believed that if someone chose to pursue revenge, they should at least make it meaningful. He then turned to Alicia and asked who she was seeking revenge against. Alicia simply smiled and said that she had no intention of doing anything serious. Still, she admitted that Twait's words had at least convinced her to keep them in mind. After that, she left, and Twait thought that he should have stopped her so they could discuss the matter more seriously. He knew that ordinary life was truly difficult, but he himself had been raised in the middle of abnormal circumstances. Because of that, he had never fully understood how fragile normal everyday life could be. Before long, he came to realize that an ordinary life could suddenly turn abnormal at any moment. Several days later, Sylphia announced to the class that she had some great news for everyone. She said that they were all surely aware of the real Luminous Order and the Royal Knights, who had accomplished remarkable feats during the subjugation of the Demon Lord. To everyone's surprise, she revealed that the real Luminous Order would soon be coming to the capital to conduct joint drills with the Royal Knights, and the drills would be held at their academy. The entire class was stunned upon hearing the announcement, as none of them had ever imagined such a thing happening. At that moment, they finally understood that this was the major event Chris had mentioned earlier. Sylphia explained that the drills were scheduled to begin in 10 days. She added that one of the main objectives of the event was to give the Academy students an opportunity to learn more about knighthood. Because of that, she encouraged everyone to freely observe the drills and learn as much as they could from them. One of the girls raised her hand and asked whether they would also have a chance to speak with the knights directly. Sylphia replied that a special time slot had indeed been prepared for student interactions with the knights. Hearing that, many of the girls became extremely excited. Meanwhile, Twait thought that the joint drills could also serve as a form of advertisement to encourage more young people to aspire to become knights. At that moment, Alicia stood up and asked whether the real Luminous Order would be the only group visiting the capital. Sylphia then revealed that, besides the real Luminous Order, Duke Robert would also be visiting the academy to observe the joint drills. She added that the students might even have an opportunity to speak with him as well. Sylphia further explained that for the organization of the joint drills, one student from each class would be selected to serve on the executive committee. Although the first-year students would mostly be assigned simple tasks, they would also be able to observe the drills more closely than the others. She then asked if anyone wanted to volunteer. Alicia immediately raised her hand. Sylphia looked around and asked if there was anyone else interested, but no one volunteered. As a result, Sylphia decided to leave the responsibility to Alicia and informed her that the committee meeting would begin during the lunch break. She instructed Alicia to head to the meeting room on the 3rd floor of the school building once the break started. Alicia agreed without hesitation, but Twait noticed a strange reaction in her eyes, along with what seemed to be a trace of anger. Since that day, Alicia had changed completely and had even started absenting herself from class regularly. Because of that, Twait asked Mize if she knew anything about what was happening with Alicia. Mize replied that although Alicia was no longer attending classes, she still continued to participate in the executive committee activities as well as the Hero Court's special meetings. Glenn was surprised to hear that and wondered why Alicia would suddenly start doing something like that. However, Mize admitted that she did not know the reason either. She explained that whenever she tried to talk to Alicia, Alicia would simply insist that she was fine. Even so, Mize felt certain that something had been troubling Alicia for quite some time. She further explained that it almost seemed as though Alicia had completely given up on her studies and was now focusing solely on improving her combat skills as efficiently as possible. Because of that, Mize believed that there had to be some deeper reason behind her behavior. Hearing all of this, Twait began to understand that Alicia was likely planning something. The scene then shifted to the Turgan Duchy, where a carriage had just arrived. A knight informed Robert that the guards dispatched from the army headquarters in the capital had also arrived and had been stationed together with the others who had come to escort Robert Turgand. When Twait arrived in class once again, both he and Glan noticed that Alicia was absent. Twait recalled how, a few days earlier, Sylphia had informed them that the academy would soon hold joint drills. At that time, Alicia, who was supposed to be an honor student, had suddenly undergone a complete change in attitude. Twait was certain that her strange behavior was somehow connected to the joint drills that were scheduled to begin in 3 days. After some time, Alicia finally returned and approached Twait, asking whether he would agree to become her special training partner. Twait thought that they had already discussed the matter quite a while ago, but she clarified that she wanted him to train with her for the next 3 days. Twait replied that he had already agreed earlier, but told her that she should not push herself so hard. However, Alicia insisted that she simply wanted to become stronger and did not have much time left. She added that this was not the moment to worry about whether she was rushing things or not, and instead asked him to cooperate with her. Concerned by her behavior, Twait grabbed her hand and asked her to calm down and at least explain what was going on. Alicia immediately turned away and refused to say anything. Realizing that he had touched upon a sensitive topic, Twait apologized, thinking that stepping on emotional landmines was clearly not one of his hobbies. Alicia suddenly became furious and shouted that even if she fought against him, the best outcome she could hope for was getting beaten badly. Because of that, she declared that she would not explain anything before walking away. After she left, Glan and Mize approached Twait and asked whether he was all right, since something clearly seemed wrong with Alicia. Twait admitted that he also wondered what had happened to her, and no matter how he looked at it, everything appeared to be connected to the upcoming joint drills. Moreover, their earlier conversation continued to bother him deeply. In the end, Twait decided to seek help from his superior. He stepped outside and contacted Chris, requesting information about a student named Alicia. The scene then shifted to the day before the joint drills. Twait approached Alicia regarding a job, but she replied that she was busy and wondered whether he had finally decided to become her special training partner. Twait denied it and instead revealed her real name, Alicia Esperando. Alicia was shocked and questioned how he had learned her true identity. Twait explained that one of his acquaintances had connections with an information broker, and although he apologized for digging into her background, he admitted that he had gathered some intel about her. Twait then recalled his earlier conversation with Chris. Chris had explained that Twait surely knew about Gallia, the former captain of the True Luminous Order who had died during the last Great War. Alicia, in fact, was revealed to be Gallia's daughter. Twait then asked about the name Mirashad Tan. Chris explained that it was the surname of Alicia's mother, who had died shortly after giving birth to her. During the Great War, the True Luminous Order had achieved remarkable feats, especially under the leadership of their captain Gallia, whose overwhelming strength had earned him the title of the Sword Demon. To the people of that era, he had been the very definition of a hero. Chris further explained that most people only knew that Gallia had died while staying behind as the rear guard during the hero party's withdrawal. His death had dealt a devastating blow to the kingdom at the time. However, that alone still did not fully explain the deep hatred Alicia carried within her. Chris continued by revealing that, later on, investigators had discovered something extremely suspicious about the withdrawal battle. It turned out that not only knights had participated in the retreat operation, but several hired mercenaries had also assisted Gallia during the rearguard mission. Strangely enough, every single one of those mercenaries had later been found dead as well. What made the situation even more suspicious was the location of the bodies. The mercenaries' corpses had been discovered far away from the place where Gallia's body was found. Twait pointed out that it had been a retreat battle, meaning the soldiers would naturally have fought while constantly changing positions. Because of that, he questioned whether it was truly odd for the bodies to be scattered across different locations. Chris clarified that the mercenaries' corpses had not merely been separated by battle movement. Instead, they had been found far away from the retreat route itself, almost as though they had been eliminated by someone else after withdrawing from the battlefield. Confused, Twait asked whether Chris had discovered any belongings of Gallia among the mercenaries. Chris confirmed that they had indeed found a pure silver pendant in the mercenaries' possession. After conducting an investigation, they learned that the pendant had been one of Gallia's treasured possessions and a gift from his late wife. From that evidence, Twait concluded that Gallia had not been killed by the Demon King Ark at all. Instead, he had most likely been betrayed and backstabbed by the mercenaries themselves. Once the mercenaries were no longer useful, they too had been disposed of to erase all evidence. Chris then revealed that the man who had hired those mercenaries was Duke Robert, the commander of the withdrawal operation. Robert had already been suspected of corruption in the past, and Chris believed that Gallia had likely discovered those crimes. As a result, Robert had arranged for his death. Apparently, one of Robert's attendants had even overheard a heated argument between Gallia and Robert shortly before the incident. At that moment, Twait finally understood Alicia's true objective. She intended to exact revenge upon Duke Robert for her father's death. However, Twait also realized that even if she somehow succeeded, her chances of surviving afterward were practically non-existent. The scene then returned to the present, where Twait pleaded with Alicia to abandon her plans. He warned her that the path she had chosen was one of self-destructive revenge. No matter how hard she tried, she would eventually be caught and meet a miserable end. Alicia coldly remarked that Twait certainly knew how to lecture others. Twait guessed that she was planning to assassinate Robert during the joint drills, which was precisely why she had volunteered to become a member of the executive committee. Even though she clearly understood that she was far from prepared, Alicia angrily shouted that she had no other choice. According to her, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that would never come again. She explained that Duke Robert rarely ever left his territory and behaved like a coward who constantly surrounded himself with guards. Public appearances from him were incredibly rare. Because of that, Alicia declared that she had to seize this opportunity even if it meant taking enormous risks or sacrificing her own life in the process. Twait reminded Alicia that they had already discussed this before and that pursuing revenge would ultimately leave her with nothing. Because of that, he urged her to withdraw from her plan. Alicia replied that she remembered everything he had told her, and if he truly believed that revenge was not worth it, then perhaps he was right. However, despite understanding his words, she admitted that she still could not suppress the feelings burning inside her. Twait then brought up Mise and Glan, pointing out that they would be devastated if they learned about her death. Alicia responded that they had only known each other for about a month, so she was certain they would forget about her soon enough. Twait questioned whether she was seriously saying something so heartless. Alicia calmly replied that it was not as though she was leaving behind a family or a lover. Even if she did have someone like that waiting for her, she claimed it still would not stop her. She then teasingly asked whether Twait intended to become her lover instead, considering how close the two of them had become lately. Twait answered that if becoming someone important to her would be enough to stop her, then he was willing to do it. Alicia stared at him in surprise before asking whether that was truly how he treated someone he claimed to love. Completely confused, Twait asked what she was even talking about. Alicia pointed out that even while kissing her earlier, Twait had never once lowered his guard around her. After saying that, she turned around and prepared to leave. Before walking away, she quietly told him that, if possible, he should stop trying to interfere with her plans. Twait realized that if he had given her even the slightest opening, she likely would have drawn her sword immediately. At that point, he concluded that convincing her was practically impossible. Finally, the day of the joint drills arrived. The students gathered together to watch the arrival of the Royal Knights. Glan, who was overflowing with excitement, enthusiastically asked Twait whether he had seen all of them. Mise was equally overwhelmed and commented that it was exactly what one would expect from the pride of the kingdom, the Royal Knights and the true Luminous Order. Glan's attention was immediately drawn toward the two highest-ranking royal guards. Mise continued by explaining that the captain and vice-captain of the true Luminous Order were also present. In addition, Lauren, Dewlight, and Garm had appeared as well. Glan remarked that Alicia was incredibly lucky since she was able to observe all of them closely due to her committee duties. Meanwhile, Twait quietly shifted his gaze toward the man seated among the distinguished guests. That man was Duke Robert, who had come personally to observe the joint drills. At that moment, Twait realized that it would be nearly impossible for Alicia to get an opportunity to strike at Duke Robert under the current circumstances. Soon afterward, a member of the executive committee made an announcement stating that mock battles between the students and the knights would soon begin. The students were told that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and they were encouraged to gather the courage to participate. Glan immediately became excited and wondered whether performing well in the mock battles might even lead to them being scouted by the knights themselves. Although Twait could not imagine things being that simple, he still decided to head toward the arena. Mise commented that Glan seemed unusually fired up before asking Twait whether he planned to participate as well. Twait nodded and replied that he intended to take advantage of the opportunity. When he picked up the practice sword, he immediately noticed how dull the blade was. Soon after, he learned that his opponent would be none other than Lauren, the captain of the true Luminous Order. Lauren was widely known for the tremendous achievements he had accomplished during the war and had earned a reputation comparable to that of the former captain himself. Twait quietly decided that he would face Lauren seriously as a sign of respect. In his eyes, Lauren was someone who operated from the shadows for the sake of the kingdom. And since Twait himself also walked within darkness, he genuinely wished to test the true extent of Lauren's strength. Lauren calmly told Twait to come at him. As Twait took a defensive stance, he immediately understood that Lauren was intentionally allowing the student to make the first move. Twait also realized that Lauren was likely far more physically exhausted than he appeared, meaning that dragging the fight out for a long time would work in Twait's favor. However, Twait knew that such an approach did not align with his true objective. Without hesitation, he rushed forward to attack. Leaping into the air, Twait swung his sword toward Lauren. However, at the last moment, he suddenly altered his movement, causing even Lauren to look slightly surprised by the unexpected change. As their swords clashed, Twait immediately followed up with a kick aimed at Lauren, prompting Lauren to praise his impressive skills. At that moment, Twait realized that Lauren had already seen through his technique and understood that Twait was relying on sharp instincts and accelerated reflexes during combat. Soon, it became Lauren's turn to counterattack. Lauren launched a strike toward Twait, but Twait managed to dodge it narrowly. Even then, he could tell that Lauren was still holding back his true strength and was likely trying to lure him into an opening. The two continued exchanging blows as their swords repeatedly collided against each other. During the battle, Twait thought that Lauren probably did not wish to fight seriously against a mere student. Even so, Twait did not mind. For this single moment, he simply wanted to witness the true power of the man standing before him. More than anything else, he wanted to see Lauren fight at full strength. Twait launched another attack while realizing that his sword strike itself had merely been a bait. The real objective had been the feint hidden behind it, allowing him to land yet another blow against Lauren. Even so, Lauren handled everything with remarkable calmness. Twait immediately leapt backward, and the moment Lauren counterattacked, Twait barely managed to block the incoming strike. Before the duel could continue any further, the host stepped in and announced that the match was over. The The surrounding students immediately erupted into cheers for Twait after witnessing his impressive performance. After the spar ended, Lauren approached Twait and apologized, admitting that he had momentarily forgotten to hold back. Twait replied that it was perfectly fine and stated that he felt honored to have sparred with the captain of the True Luminous Order. Lauren responded by saying that he was nothing compared to the former captain. He further added that Twait should not mistake his words for false humility. Despite everything, Lauren was now the captain of the order, and he intended to protect his comrades and fulfill his duty with his own hands. Twait thanked him sincerely for the sparring match. Before leaving, Lauren asked for Twait's name. Once Twait introduced himself, Lauren calmly stated that he would remember that name. As Lauren walked away, Twait reflected on just how strong the man truly was. During their final exchange, Twait had barely managed to react to the sword strike that had flown straight toward his face. Still, the battle had allowed Twait to gain a much clearer understanding of Lauren's actual strength. Twait then recalled his earlier conversation with Chris. At that time, Chris had asked whether Twait was suggesting that the Bureau should designate Robert as a target. Twait had answered affirmatively and questioned whether the Bureau planned to take action against him. After remaining silent for a moment, Chris eventually replied that she could not share that information with him. The scene then returned to the present. Mize and Glan were still excited after watching Twait's battle, but Twait himself was deep in thought. He understood that the Bureau was most likely already aware of Robert's corruption. However, despite Robert's crimes, the Bureau had probably judged that his existence was still beneficial to the kingdom. After all, the organization only acted according to the interests of national defense. At the same time, the security surrounding Robert showed no signs of weakening anytime soon. Because of that, Twait concluded that it would be impossible for Alicia to assassinate him during the drills themselves, which meant that she would most likely attempt it during the night. Instead, after his conversation with Alicia the previous day, Twait had already realized something important. The hatred burning inside her would never disappear until Robert was dead, and because of that, Twait no longer intended to stop her. Alicia remembered that her father, Gallia, was the person she admired the most in the entire world. The True Luminous Order judged people solely based on their abilities and was filled with experienced veterans, yet Gallia had always been entrusted with the honorable position of captain. He was so powerful that he was known as the strongest captain in the Order's history and had earned the fearsome title of the Sword Demon. However, whenever he was with Alicia, he became the warmest and most caring family member she could have ever wished for. His sense of justice was stronger than anyone else's, just as his devotion to the sword was unmatched. Because of her admiration for him, Alicia had begun swinging a sword from a very young age. She recalled a memory from the past when she had been practicing swordsmanship alone in the garden. Her father had approached her and asked whether she wished to become a knight like him in the future. When she eagerly agreed, he decided to teach her what he believed was the most important lesson. He told her that she must live a straightforward life and continue moving directly toward whatever she believed in. If she did so, her sword would naturally become straightforward as well. According to him, a knight's sword must always remain straight because a twisted sword could neither protect others nor earn their trust. After saying those words, he gently patted her on the head and encouraged her to live honestly, continue swinging her sword, and become someone worthy of trust. The very next day, the Knights of the Luminous Order were commanded to participate in the Great Hero War, causing every visit from her father afterward to feel tense and uncertain. Even so, Alicia engraved his words deeply into her heart. Wanting to follow in his footsteps, she suppressed the loneliness of rarely being able to see him and devoted herself entirely to swordsmanship. Years later, the war entered its final stage, and the hero's party finally stepped into the territory of the demons. Upon hearing the news, Alicia became overjoyed because she believed that once the hero defeated the Demon King, the war would finally come to an end and her father would return home safely. She often wondered what her father would say after seeing how much her swordsmanship had improved. She imagined him praising her and proudly telling her that she had truly grown stronger. However, nothing like that ever happened. Instead, the only thing that arrived was the news of her father's death. In order to secure an escape route for the hero's party, Gallia had sacrificed his life during a fierce battle against the demons. Alicia thought that it was exactly like her father to remain steadfast until the very end and never return home again. Even so, she resolved to continue living according to the teachings he had left behind. One day, a follower of Robert, who had taken control of the True Luminous Order, visited her to deliver one of her father's belongings as a memento. During the visit, the man hesitantly mentioned that there was something important he needed to tell her. He explained that by pure chance, he had once overheard an argument between Gallia and Robert. According to him, the confrontation had taken place within the Demon King's territory near Sergeant Duchy's quarters. The man had secretly heard their voices from a rooftop where even retainers were forbidden to enter. Among the fragments of conversation he overheard were words such as embezzlement and silence. Because of that, the servant believed that Gallia had discovered Robert's corruption and that Robert might have arranged Gallia's death in order to silence him permanently. At first, Alicia found it difficult to believe such a claim. Since she lacked any solid proof, she decided to personally investigate the matter by speaking with members of the true Luminous Order. Whether out of sympathy for her loss or respect for her father, the Knights did not hide any information from her when she asked about the circumstances surrounding Galia's death. During the retreat battle in which her father had served as the rear guard, Robert had suddenly deployed several mercenaries as reinforcements. According to the Knights, the decision itself had already seemed strange and unreasonable. Furthermore, immediately after Galia's death, those mercenaries abandoned their assigned objectives and fled far away from the battlefield. Robert had instantly labeled their actions as betrayal and ordered the Knights to execute them on the spot. As Alicia learned about the sequence of events, everything began to feel disturbingly unnatural to her. The more she thought about it, the more convinced she became that Robert had orchestrated her father's death from the very beginning. Her father had lived an honest and righteous life, yet his end had been cruel and unjust. Even so, Alicia swore that she would never forget the teachings he had left her. She resolved to continue living a straightforward life just as he had taught her, while dedicating herself to the day she would finally bring about Robert's downfall. The scene returned to the present, where Alicia silently stared at Robert, the man she believed had killed her father for the sake of filling his own pockets. To be honest, she wanted nothing more than to slit his throat where he stood. However, there were far too many guards surrounding him for her to recklessly make a move. At the same time, her attention shifted toward Twait's battle against Lauren. Watching the fight left her genuinely shocked because Twait was moving far faster than he had during the entrance examination. That realization made her wonder whether he had been holding back his true abilities the entire time. A more troubling thought soon crossed her mind. If Twait were to side with the enemy and stand in her way, her revenge plan would undoubtedly fail. Because of that, she repeatedly reminded herself not to lose focus. This was not the right time to act carelessly. Once the drills ended, Alicia recalled that the duty committee members would assist with transporting the equipment used during training. Meanwhile, the true Luminous Order would personally deliver the equipment they had brought to the Royal Guard's storehouse near the castle. She also learned that Robert would be attending an inner gathering being held inside the castle that same night. That information became the foundation of her plan. Even Robert would not be permitted to enter the castle while surrounded by heavily armed bodyguards. Alicia therefore decided that the moment he entered the castle would be her best opportunity to strike. In her heart, she quietly asked her parents to wait just a little longer because she intended to end everything that very night. Twait, meanwhile, seemed to have already understood what she was planning. As night finally arrived and the people finished their duties, Alicia concealed herself in the shadows while thinking that she needed to hurry and get closer to Robert before the opportunity disappeared. Eventually, a carriage stopped in front of the castle. From her hiding place, she carefully observed Robert as he stepped out. Just as she had expected, he dismissed his guards and began walking alone toward the castle grounds. The interior of the castle was already heavily guarded, but Alicia believed that if she attacked right before Robert entered, the soldiers would not be able to react quickly enough to stop her. However, to her surprise, Robert did not head toward the castle entrance at all. The unexpected change in direction left her shocked and confused as she wondered where he was actually going. She then remembered hearing rumors about the beautiful garden located beside the castle, a place said to possess an otherworldly beauty, especially beneath the moonlight. Seeing Robert walk in that direction without a single guard accompanying him, Alicia began to wonder if he truly intended to visit the garden alone. And if that was the case, then perhaps this was finally her chance to kill him. At that moment, Alicia completely lost herself to her emotions. The only thought running through her mind was to kill Robert no matter what. She charged toward him at full speed, determined not to let him escape. In a single motion, she drew her sword and swung it toward his neck. The blade cleanly severed his head, sending it flying through the air before his body collapsed to the ground. For a brief moment, Alicia burst into cruel laughter as overwhelming satisfaction consumed her. She had finally succeeded in killing Robert. Everyone had once told her that accomplishing such a thing was impossible, yet she was standing there with Robert already dead before her eyes. However, once the excitement faded, confusion quickly took its place. She began wondering what she was supposed to do next and where she should hide from that point onward. Alicia had spent her entire life pursuing revenge for that very moment, yet she had never once considered what would come after achieving it. She no longer knew how she was supposed to continue living the straightforward life her father had taught her to follow. After struggling with her thoughts for some time, she ultimately decided that returning to the academy was probably the only place where she still belonged. The following day, while Twait was wandering around the academy grounds, Alicia approached him and quietly stated that she had finally put an end to everything. Twait immediately understood what she meant just by looking at her expression. He then wondered how she felt after finally achieving her revenge. Alicia admitted that she had initially felt incredibly happy, as though she could soar into the sky. Surprisingly, however, that feeling had quickly vanished, leaving behind only emptiness. She confessed that she no longer even felt alive. Twait understood her feelings. To be honest, he had never expected her to return alive in the first place. From his perspective, she had only survived because every possible condition had aligned perfectly in her favor. Alicia seriously agreed with his words and admitted that luck had been the only reason she managed to come back alive. After a brief silence, she asked him what she was supposed to do now. Twait thought about it for a moment before suggesting that she head to the infirmary for the time being because the exhausted look on her face would inevitably attract unwanted attention. He then advised her to take things slowly and carefully think about what she wanted to do with her future. After all, she now had all the time she needed. Alicia quietly thanked him before leaving the area. Once the class began, Sylphia informed the students that they would be attending an afternoon class. During the session, Glan called out to Twait and wondered why Alicia had once again failed to attend class. He mentioned that he had seen her handling executive committee duties during the drills, yet she was still absent from class, which made him worry about what might have happened to her. Hearing this, Twait recalled his earlier conversation with Alicia and wondered how she had felt after taking revenge and witnessing death. After killing Robert, she had wanted to fly away, but instead, she had felt completely empty and had not known what she should do next. The scene then returned to the present as the classroom door opened and Alicia finally arrived. She apologized for being late, explaining that she had stopped by the infirmary on the way. Sylphia allowed her to take her seat without further issue. After the classes ended, Glan and Mise hurried over to Alicia in the garden and admitted that they had been genuinely worried because she had been acting strangely lately. They asked whether she was truly fine. Alicia assured them that she was, after which Mise grabbed her hand and told her not to overwork herself. She added that if Alicia ever needed help with anything, they would gladly support her. Alicia thanked both of them for their concern. Soon afterward, Mise apologized and explained that she needed to take care of something in town. When Glan curiously asked what it was, Mise revealed that she was planning to apply to the Adventurer Guild. Although she knew her skills were lacking, she still wanted to get as close as possible to her dream. Upon hearing this, Alicia remembered that Mise had always dreamed of becoming an adventurer and traveling around the world. Mise happily confirmed it and said that she believed adventurers enjoyed the greatest freedom in the world. Inspired by Mise's words, Alicia suddenly decided that she wanted to become an adventurer as well. Mise became emotional with excitement and suggested that they enroll in the guild immediately, mentioning that registration was completely free. She also promised to teach Alicia the basics along the way. Alicia gladly accepted the offer. At the same time, Glan asked Twait where they should go next. Twait began to think about it, but Mise impatiently urged everyone to hurry to the guild instead. Twait agreed, and just then Alicia called out to him, saying that she was truly glad to still be alive. Twait wondered if she had finally come to realize it. Alicia explained that being able to think about the future like that felt wonderful to her. Suddenly, they noticed a man standing behind them. The stranger demanded to know Alicia's identity before abruptly rushing forward to attack her. Twait immediately used his power to block the strike and realized that Alicia's head would have been cut off if he had failed to stop the slash in time. He then wondered who the attacker was. The man explained that the sword he carried had been found among the belongings of the royal castle guard the previous night. Showing the blade to Alicia, he asked whether she recognized it. Alicia immediately remembered that it was her sword and became visibly worried. Realizing the danger of the situation, Twait told her that they needed to escape at once, and he quickly grabbed her hand before running away with her. Glan and Mise soon caught up with Twait and Alicia and anxiously asked whether everything was all right. Without wasting any time, Twait urged them to run immediately. Glan was completely confused by the sudden panic, especially when he noticed a man rushing toward them. As Glan hesitated in confusion, Twait quickly told him to stop the attacker. Glan attempted to punch the man, but the stranger effortlessly blocked the attack and coldly stated that his only business was with Alicia. He then ordered Glan to take Mise and Alicia and flee somewhere far away. Although Glan still did not understand what was happening, Twait told him not to worry and assured him that they would catch up soon. Trusting Twait despite his confusion, Glan grabbed Mise's hand and began running away with her. Soon, the mysterious man stood directly in front of Twait and Alicia and remarked that he would not mind even if Twait escaped as long as he surrendered Alicia to them. He promised that no harm would come to the other two if Twait cooperated. Hearing that, Twait realized the man was indirectly threatening everyone else if he refused. The attacker then rushed forward once again and launched another strike at Twait. Twait blocked the attack and after glancing toward Alicia, decided that they needed to change their strategy. He told her that they should head toward a side alley instead. However, the man declared that he would never allow Alicia to escape and immediately slashed at her. Twait reacted instantly and pushed Alicia away, taking the strike on his own shoulder instead. The attacker appeared impressed and commented that Twait moved remarkably well for nothing more than a mere student. The sword pierced Twait's shoulder, leaving Alicia horrified. Even while injured, Twait desperately urged her to run away. Although she hesitated, Twait shouted at her again, forcing her to flee. As she ran, Alicia could not stop herself from thinking that Twait had lost far too easily. She felt as though the person she knew would never come to save her anymore, and she became convinced that Twait had died. After some time, another man suddenly appeared in front of Alicia and asked where she thought she was trying to escape to. Shocked, She quickly realized that she had already been surrounded. One of the men irritably commented that the insects getting in their way were becoming troublesome and ordered the others to deal with them quickly. At that moment, Alicia noticed the severed head of someone nearby. The horrifying sight terrified her, and she desperately demanded to know why they were targeting her and why they would commit such cruel acts. One of the men responded by asking whether she still needed to ask after seeing their armor. Upon recognizing it, Alicia realized that they belonged to the True Luminous Order. The man confirmed that they were indeed members of the True Luminous Night Order. Alicia bitterly declared that they were no different from her. Despite her fear, she tried to stand and run once again, but she slipped and fell to the ground. The knights questioned why she continued struggling when she should have already understood that things were always going to end this way. One of them explained that although they now served as knights, they had once been war orphans who had been saved by Robert. They admitted that they had failed to achieve anything meaningful during the war, but after it ended, they had sworn to repay Robert for saving them. However, before they could ever return the favor, Robert had been murdered. The man questioned whether Alicia had finally begun to value her own life. He told her that when someone fulfilled a wish by sacrificing their own future, they could not simply expect to regain that future without facing any consequences. According to him, the current situation was the result of her desperately clinging to life, even after she had already thrown away her future. Because of that, 3 innocent people had become entangled in her karma and lost their lives. Hearing those words, Alicia began to believe that everything they were saying was true. She felt convinced that the deaths of Twait, Glan, and Mise were all her fault. She realized that revenge had only been an attempt to reclaim what she had lost, and even if she had succeeded, all it would have done was reduce her losses back to 0. There had never been anything meaningful to gain from it. At that moment, she remembered Twait's words and realized how correct he had been all along. After finally taking her revenge, the only thing left inside her heart had been emptiness. She bitterly concluded that revenge itself was worthless. The man coldly remarked that it was good that she had finally understood and told her to remember those feelings well. Alicia then thought about how, merely for the sake of satisfying that empty revenge, she had caused the deaths of 3 of her friends. Filled with regret, she cried out that if only she had known things would turn out that way, she would never have chosen that path. Suddenly, the man's face covering slipped away. To Alicia's shock, the person standing before her was none other than Twait himself. Seeing him alive left her completely stunned. She was completely stunned to see him alive and wondered how he had survived after being stabbed by that strange man from the True Luminous Order. Twait replied that everything had happened because of revenge, involving Glan, Mise, and even Alicia. He then began revealing the truth, explaining that the entire ambush she had experienced had been nothing more than a farce orchestrated by him. Hearing that left her shocked. Twait explained that he had never died in the first place. The head of Mise and Glan had merely been fake creations made through alchemy. Unable to comprehend what she was hearing, she listened as Twait continued, saying that the Twait she had seen acting as the attacker was actually him, while the person who had first appeared had been one of his acquaintances, someone he considered a former colleague. She wondered if everything that had happened had been part of his plan. Twait replied that it was not limited to just that day. She was then horrified as she questioned whether Robert, the man she had killed, had also been fake. Twait confirmed that Robert was still alive and that the one she had killed the previous night had only been a doll he had prepared in advance. He further explained that, in reality, nobody even believed anything significant had happened the previous night, and that the members of the Luminous Altar were still enjoying themselves in the capital at that very moment. However, Alicia still showed no signs of giving up on her revenge. That was why Twait had revealed everything, hoping it would help calm her down. Afterward, both of them felt they needed to change their clothes. Sometime later, while they were sitting together in the park, Twait apologized for dragging her into everything so suddenly and admitted that he might have gone too far. He confessed that the entire incident had been a play arranged by him. However, although it had all been staged, he explained that the scenario itself had not been arbitrary. According to him, it represented a future that was highly likely to happen, the tragic end brought about by self-destructive revenge. Alicia quietly agreed as Twait explained everything to her. Ever since she had learned about her father's death, she had devoted herself entirely to revenge and had finally achieved it. However, the joy she had expected lasted only for a brief moment. After a single night had passed, all that remained inside her was emptiness and the constant fear that the knights would eventually discover what she had done. In an attempt to suppress those feelings, she had unknowingly started thinking about her future. She wondered if Twait considered her insane because, as long as she could avenge her father, she had been willing to sacrifice everything else. Never once had she imagined a future for herself. Because of her actions, Glan, Mise, and even Twait had supposedly died. She believed that nothing but a cruel death awaited her, and realizing that truth struck her deeply. At that moment, the only emotion filling her mind was regret. Twait understood that she had finally calmed down. Even after learning that Robert was still alive, she no longer felt any desire for revenge. He told her that such an ending would never satisfy anyone. Confused, Alicia listened as Twait reminded her of something he had said earlier about making revenge worthwhile. Although she had agreed with him at the time, she had pursued revenge without considering her own future. Twait explained that amateurs often threw themselves into self-destructive revenge because they became consumed by hatred. However, that was precisely why professionals existed in that line of work. Experts who treated such matters as routine tasks, even including after-sales service. He then told her that she needed to come up with a way to deceive Glenn and the others. As Twait began walking away, Alicia asked where he was going. Twait calmly replied that he was going to take out the trash. Afterward, Twait contacted Chris. She asked him to explain what he had meant earlier about taking out the trash, since she could not recall anything related to the Bureau. Twait simply asked her to handle the matter for him, and the two eventually met in person. During their meeting, Twait mentioned that he remembered searching for eavesdropping equipment himself. Chris merely smiled at his words, and Twait remarked that such efficiency was exactly what he expected from the Royal Defense Intelligence Bureau, the organization responsible for protecting the nation. Chris then told him that she had brought the item he had requested and that he could inspect it himself. As Twait looked at the circular device, excitement appeared on his face. Chris jokingly told him that she would pray for his success. The scene then shifted to a mansion belonging to a noble within the royal castle grounds. There, Robert was being served a drink. Before touching it, he ordered the waiter to taste it first for poison. The waiter initially failed to understand what he meant, but after Robert repeated himself, the servant reluctantly drank it. At that moment, Lauren approached Robert and pointed out that they were already inside the royal castle, where security was extremely strict. Furthermore, during the journey there, Robert had personally requested additional guards from the capital to strengthen the protection around him. Lauren asked him to forgive his curiosity, but wondered what exactly Robert feared so much. Robert asked whether Lauren was implying that he was afraid of someone. Lauren appeared confused, but Robert continued by explaining that there were rumors, one supposedly suppressed by the higher-ups in the army, that Lauren had likely heard as well. He spoke about the other side, a dark organization secretly operated by the kingdom and known as a top-secret special operations unit within the military. As Robert finished speaking, Lauren admitted that he had indeed heard rumors about them during the Great War. According to the stories, the soldiers of the other side used every possible method to eliminate their enemies, including stabbing, poisoning, strangulation, and shooting, employing techniques beyond what ordinary humans could even imagine. Robert replied that the most terrifying among them were the individuals known as aces. He added that one of those men had once killed a demon general entirely on his own, even though the hero himself had been unable to defeat him. While calmly enjoying his drink, Robert noticed Lauren's hesitation as the man admitted that he found such stories difficult to believe. Robert responded that there was never smoke without fire, which was why he remained cautious of an organization like theirs. Lauren then remarked that although they referred to them as the other side, they still served the same country, and because of that, he wondered whether there was truly any reason for Robert to fear them so much. Robert replied that an organization which constantly hid its own existence could never truly be trusted. He believed that he had erased every trace of evidence after killing Bralia, the person who had uncovered his secrets and had disguised the incident as a martyrdom. Even the direct culprits connected to the matter had already been silenced, leaving no reason for anyone to target him anymore. However, he admitted that one could never be too cautious. Lauren reassured him not to worry. Although he admitted that he was nowhere near as capable as the former captain, he promised that he would still protect Robert with his life. Hearing those words, Robert inwardly thought that knights were incredibly convenient. Unless something truly serious occurred, they would never betray their masters, making them nothing more than loyal and easy to control dogs. Changing the subject, Robert asked how the mock battles with the students had gone and whether Lauren had noticed any promising individuals. Since many of their men had been injured during the Great War, Robert hoped to replenish their forces with talented recruits. Lauren replied that there had indeed been one student who had managed to scratch his armor, something he considered impressive. The student's name was Twait, and Lauren admitted that the young man was exceptionally talented. At that moment, a waiter entered the room and informed Lauren that a present had arrived for him. Lauren looked surprised, and the waiter explained that it had been sent by a student who had attended the joint graves ceremony. According to him, a member of the night order patrolling outside had received the package, and there was also a letter addressed to Lauren inside it. Lauren immediately became suspicious and stated that they were not supposed to accept such things. The waiter apologized and explained that the sender had been extremely persistent, leaving them with little choice but to accept it. After hearing that the package had already passed through the hands of the night order, Lauren assumed it had likely been inspected already. Thinking there would be no problem, he decided to open it. The moment the package was opened, thick smoke suddenly spread throughout the room. Shocked and furious, Lauren immediately turned toward the waiter and demanded to know what it was. Trembling in fear, the waiter insisted that he knew absolutely nothing about it. Unable to see through the smoke, Robert anxiously asked what was happening and ordered the windows to be opened at once. As panic spread through the room, Robert recalled the rumors about the soldiers of the other side, their methods of killing through stabbing, poisoning, strangulation, and even shooting. At that instant, Lauren realized the truth. Before he could stop him or warn him not to open the window, Robert had already done it. The moment the window opened, Twait, who had been waiting outside as a sniper, fired a single bullet straight through Robert's head, killing him instantly.